So, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's 2:29, regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Can I have a roll call?
Madam Chair Hamilton,
Here,
Commissioner Roybal,
excused.
Commissioner Moreno,
Present.
Commissioner Garcia,
Temporarily excused, he said he would rejoin slightly later.
Commissioner Henson.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So today we have Public Works doing the opening ceremonies. Interestingly, I have employee changed listed as doing the pledge, so please introduce yourself and I apologize. And Leroy Alvarado doing the state pledge and Safrino Houston doing a moment of reflection.
Everett Lovato.
Thank you very much.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Leroy Alvarado. Leroy.
The flag of the state of New Mexico
And see a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Excuse me.
Let us take a moment to focus on the work ahead of us today, being mindful in the decision in the best interest of our community. We will take a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to mention that in addition to Public Works, before he moved, Seth is a firefighter and was at Glorieta Pass, and we miss him very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look at that nice new hat you have.
Oh, cool. Excellent. So, Seth is one of those firefighters that makes me want to be bigger in my next life, so I can like do more. So, the agenda. Manager Miller, are there any changes or items?
Yes, Madam Chair. So we did post an amended agenda on Friday, November 22nd at 3:59. And those items that were amended on the agenda on page 2, item 4, miscellaneous action items. That is a resolution adopting the Santa Fe County Fleet Management Policy and Procedures. On also, we need to move from the consent agenda down to action items, item 2E. So we just need to take that off of consent, and that
Okay.
there was a
E is
typo in that, and so we didn't want you to approve it. We want to make sure we discuss it, and
Okay,
you know what that is.
fabulous.
Then on item 6, presentations, if we could move that item up to opening business, item K.
Okay, no problem.
It's an introduction of new employees, they're just four-legged.
Good point.
And then under matters from the county manager, we also added item B and item C. Those are some miscellaneous updates. And then also under informational reports, item 11D, the Public Works report was added. It was not ready at the time of the original agenda.
Excellent. So with those changes, what's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you very much. A motion and a second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Very much appreciated. So that takes us to approval of the minutes from first from the regular meeting, the BCC of October 29th.
Madam Chair, I have some changes to the agenda, to the minutes, and I thought I might have a question, no, so I have changes, I'll give them to Karen, and I move to approve with changes.
Can I have a second? Thank you, I have a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? So thank you. 1H, approval of the November 12th canvassing board meeting minutes.
Madam Chair, I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, motion is second, all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, so that takes us to item I, recognition of years of service for Santa Fe County employees. Manager Miller.
Yes, let's see if, are they bringing any of these people in? Do you know?
Lily, come on. That's new hot.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do this one first, if you don't mind.
Okay, so
Madam
we're
Chair.
on K first.
Yeah, sorry about that, it's easier for them if
Easy
they
come, easy go. I, it's,
So we were talking the other day that we had a couple of new employees, I don't know if you recall that we retired Lenny a few months ago. And but we have actually 2 new canines and new handlers, so if you would like to
Yeah, so
introduce them?
this is the Security Threat Intelligence Unit, and in the unit I have 2 canine handlers. To my right is Jose de la Cruz, and with him is canine officer Nico. He's one of our new dogs. Just finished a 6-week academy, both the handler and the dog. They are trained in narcotics, to include Suboxone, which is one of the most popular drugs now into the facility. And to my left is gonna be Shayna Beta, and her dog is canine officer Enzo. So, and he too just completed the academy for canine handler course. And he is also certified in all narcotics, to include Suboxone. They both also are trained in detection, meaning if we do have an escape, or knock on wood, if there's ever an incident, we can actually send the dogs out, they can sniff them out. So it's a good tool that we have.
So the questions, good.
Yeah, where did they go to school?
So
I
it was,
read it, I know, but I'm.
yeah, it's with Canine Services, and it was throughout the state, but the majority of the time they trained out of Albuquerque.
And welcome.
Thank you.
And welcome to the dogs also. They're not exactly puppies.
Yeah, you will.
They're not a dog, I don't think we wanna refer to them as puppies.
Yeah.
They're real dogs.
Yeah,
Okay,
they definitely are employees of Santa Fe County, and they are treated as one, so.
So we're happy to have them here, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moreno.
What are their ages?
You wanna say?
So Nico, he's about 2 years old right now. He's just turned 2. He came from France, just to kind of extend on it. He came from France. He was,
Ooh la la.
he was selected out of his litter, and he was in France for about a year doing some police sport training, and then was bought by another sport handler in Mexico where we purchased him.
He's bilingual?
Trilingual, sounds like.
So his commands though are in German, so I do speak to him in German, like all his commands are in German.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Sure, that way most people don't know what language they're speaking and don't know what to tell them to do.
That's right, yeah.
That's why they do.
And Enzo, he's 4, May 28th, 2014 is his birthday. And he came from Mexico.
Yes.
And this will be his 2nd year actually graduating from the canine services. And so he's as well trained in tracking and narcotic detection and all that. So. And as well has a German commands.
Excellent. Do you guys run different shifts or?
No, we
Work
work the
together?
same shift together, but everywhere we go, they're with us. If we go down to booking, wherever we may go, they go with us. I mean, so we're always together, so the dogs work well together, work hand in hand. So it's a bit easier for us when we looking for any type of narcotics. It's a faster process because we have 2 dogs on each side or up top, down on the bottom.
So, did you introduce yourself?
I did, I'm
Hi,
the
Deborah.
former canine handler,
Right.
I'm the one that used to run Lenny, who we just recently retired, and who is currently living up in the country.
And how is Lenny?
Yeah, he's doing wonderful, and right now he's bulking up for the winter months, and
That means he's getting more treats and he
yes,
doesn't have to
he's getting
stay
a little
in.
bit more treats than usual, but he's loving life and definitely following some cows around and he's loving it, so he's doing good, yes.
It's nice to know he can catch all those bovine drug
Yeah, absolutely.
offenders, right?
Yeah. So we got a good team and we appreciate you all.
Thank
We
you very
appreciate
much
you.
for bringing him here and letting us know, we're really proud of you guys.
Thank you.
So Madam Chair, we really appreciate you coming here. Thank you so much for taking the time away from detention center to come here and have us a chance to meet these new additional employees of Santa Fe County. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
We still didn't say her name.
Do we have any employee recognitions in this week? Okay.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
the next item on the agenda was if I go back to the original agenda, was the recognition of years of service for Santa Fe County employees for November of 2019. As you know, we started a recognition program several years ago that recognizes employees on a monthly basis for those who have completed consecutive years of service in 5-year increments. And we truly value those employees that stay with Santa Fe County and make a career here. So I just wanted to express the appreciation to those employees that hit a milestone in November. In corrections at the adult facility, we have Jorge Dominguez. In projects and facilities management and building services, we have Gia Black. And in property control in projects, in public works and projects facilities management, we have John Reinhardt. All 3 of those hit 5 years of service. And then in animal control, we had 2 employees in the sheriff's department that hit 10 years, and that's Brian Brandel II and Ronaldo Ulibarri. And then your very own Tina Salazar in the manager's office as a liaison, hit 15 years. So just want to congratulate them and thank them for their years of service.
Absolutely. Anybody have comments? I definitely wanna thank all of them for their years of service and thank Tina in particular, congratulate her on 15 years, that's a big deal, and thank her for being such an excellent liaison and for having the absolute nerve of being in Hawaii at this time. Well-deserved break.
And then the next item was new hires, and we recognize in the month following new hires, after they've been here with us a month, we just like to recognize them, and I don't think we have any available that are on the list. However, in the month of October, we hired in the housing department the maintenance supervisor. I think you guys got to meet him today, Christopher Sandoval. In corrections, 2 detention officers, Eric Bloom and Joshua Riviero. And in the dispatch center, Nada Coriz and Cheyenne Germandonk as communications specialists. And then in the sheriff's office is a records clerk, Gabriela Trujillo, not to be confused with the Gabby Trujillo that is in the public works. So just want to welcome those employees to the county and glad that they have joined us.
Excellent. Wish them
So Madam Chair.
very long and happy service.
Yes, I hope so, and so as I said, we appreciate those employees who stay with us, particularly for an extended length of time. And with that, that concludes the
Open.
employee recognitions.
Excellent, thank you so much, Manager Miller. That brings us to the consent agenda, and just a reminder, that we've pulled item E as in Edward off, so we have the consent agenda, except for that item. What's the pleasure of the board? Are there any other items people have questions about that they want pulled? Or,
Madam Chair, I move to approve.
Second.
thank you, and so that's a motion to approve except for item E, and a second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you,
Madam Chair,
yes.
for item 2B, that resolution number will be resolution number 2019-139. Item C will be resolution number 2019-140.
Thank you. So that we can discuss item E off the consent agenda. Manager Miller, did you wanna start that out perhaps?
Yes,
I'm not sure. Not yet.
Have a seat, we're almost finished consent.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Manager Miller, we removed this from the consent agenda because there was a incorrect citation in the resolution. If you look at the section in the resolution that says whereas resolution number 2014-143, it should say as amended, section 3B limits the county manager's signature authority to accept donations to $500,000. And this is for the item for the public works to accept recycled asphalt pavement from the New Mexico DOT to be utilized to improve county roads. The RAP has a value that could be used by the county to improve our roads and will save us a significant amount of money. And by way of information, RAP is a term that is given to removed or reprocessed pavement materials containing asphalt and aggregates. They're generated from resurfacing or reconstructing roads. When properly crushed and screened, they yield high quality, well-graded aggregates that can be used to help us to take care of county roads. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
So are there any questions on this item? Commissioner Hanson?
So will we get a clean copy in our board docs of the resolution? Or are you just changing it here on the spot and then?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, we did not intend to upload it to board docs, though we can do that. And in fact, we can hand out clean copies, but they were as described.
Okay,
It was caught a few minutes before the meeting and that's why.
okay.
And Madam Chair, Commissioner, I apologize for that oversight.
Well, that's no problem, but if the board docs, you know, they remain available, you know, historic versions, so we might wanna replace with the correct
It's a
version,
very
if
fair
it's a
point,
big,
and we will
yeah,
do that
Yeah.
shortly after.
no big
this
deal
meeting.
otherwise, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I personally
Oh, no.
agree. I think it should be uploaded, the correct
Understood,
version,
we'll
Yeah.
do that, thank you.
to board doc.
So what's the pleasure of the board?
I move to approve with the new resolution being uploaded to board docs and with the changes to allow donations up to $500,000
Excellent,
as amended.
excellent. Can I have a second?
Yes.
Second. So I have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
So that takes us to miscellaneous items, if I
Madam
have,
Chair,
yes, oh yes, I have a resolution number, thank you for,
that resolution number is 2019-141.
thank you. So that takes us to miscellaneous items. Thank you so much. Thank you. So this is a miscellaneous item is a resolution adopting the fleet management policies. Claudia.
Madam Chair, I
Yes,
just
Commissioner
have a
Hall.
question. You're handing out a new document where we've added another whereas.
That's
Is that-
correct, and Ms.
Okay.
Borchert, who's gonna lead the discussion on this item,
Okay,
can
thank
explain the background to that, and I can add in as necessary to explain why that whereas clause came from, or where it came from and what it's trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So good afternoon, thank you for your attention today to our fleet management policies here we're bringing to you, hoping that you're going to approve. Let's start with the correction that Greg just spoke about.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Claudia, could you introduce everybody, cause I'm not sure everybody.
Well, I was gonna get to that next one.
Okay.
Or do you want me to, I was gonna start with the edit and then go into my presentation, I can do it whatever way you want.
I just wanted you to
Okay.
introduce who
Alright, so then I can start with our team here. So really this policy is the result of a lot of effort from a lot of different people, but I want to recognize the people that have helped, which is Eric Ogle and I started working on this a few years ago. Dean Kitchens is here to represent Fleet. Unfortunately, Chris Narvaez couldn't be here because of the holidays, he's up visiting his daughter. Jacqueline Bean is a new sustainability specialist with us, and Greg was instrumental in helping us get it across the finish line. And Gary, of course, in the interim role, has helped us get this to where we are today.
Thank you.
So that's why we're all here, because this has been a team effort. And later in the presentation, I'll talk about the other people that we are also, that were also really helpful in getting us to where we are today. So the change that's that you've just been handed out is an addition of a whereas. It's the second from the bottom on page 1 of the resolution, and what it clarifies is that there was a fleet management policy that was adopted unanimously by the board on August 26, 2014. It never got recorded because there was direction for a few things to be revised in working with some of the elected officials, and so it's not on the record as being a resolution, but it was passed by the board. So this whereas is added to address that, and additionally, in the now therefore be it resolved on page 2 of the resolution, item number 4 also addresses that by stating that the resolution number 2014-18 is null and void. So those are the changes that are now going to be part of the resolution. And I guess we could do the same thing as per the last item and upload board docs to make sure it reflects these changes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've introduced our team. So I also want to mention that, Christella Valdez is also not here right now. She was another person that really helped make sure that we got these fleet management policies refined and polished. And also integrated the concerns from the unions from her. So I want to point out that the policy development process included discussing the draft policy with stakeholders. We met with elected officials, department directors, other county stakeholders, and we reached out to each of the 6 county employee collective bargaining unions, 3 of whom we met with in person. Using all these resources, our team devised these fleet management policies and procedures to improve the acquisition, the operation, the maintenance, and the efficiency of the county fleet in the most simple and flexible way possible. These policies pave the way for procedures that can change as the vehicle and fleet landscape changes. And they provide a mechanism by which the county can systematically and strategically move towards the right number and the right type of vehicles to carry out its mission to serve the residents of Santa Fe County. Alright, so I guess I can, wow, I don't even have to point at anything. Alright, so why these policies? Here's the key reasons why we believe these policies are important. First, they were identified in the strategic plan and passed lead by example conservation resolutions. They fulfill the recommendation by the county's internal auditor as presented to the internal audit committee. They provide opportunity to meet Paris Agreement greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, since fleet is a source of probably half of our county emissions. and the complete and update the work began in 2014. That was all the changes that we added to the resolution. Well, so in order to understand the potential benefits of the fleet policy, I think it's important to begin with some fleet statistics. The county has about 750 fleet equipment, approximately 250 vehicles have installed GPS units. And by the way, in case you're interested, this is what an actual GPS unit looks like. So this is what's installed in 250 of our vehicles. The county spends about $5.5 million on fleet acquisition, 1.2 million on fuel, 600,000 on maintenance and repair, another $600,000 on the fine mechanics who work on the fleet, and 125 on the rental of downtown parking spaces. There are other soft costs. With other soft costs, I think we might be reaching a $10 million enterprise, all associated with our fleet. We burn over 500,000 gallons of gasoline and diesel annually, resulting in about 1,600 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions per year. So given those statistics, how can these policies benefit the county? Well, there are at least 4 ways. The first is safety, for which we all know there is no price. The GPS data shows that in one year, there were 746 incidents of 148 vehicles driving over 80 miles per hour. We want to keep our employees and the people who share the road with them as healthy and safe as possible. Per these policies, the GPS data can be used by supervisors for managing vehicle use, investigating public complaints, and for accident investigations. The overarching intent is that the county, with the help of the collective bargaining agreements, the HR handbook, the safety manual, these policies, and the GPS data, together keep our county vehicle operators safe and accountable. Secondly, the fleet management policies save the county and the taxpayers money. For every 10% increase in our fuel efficiency, we would save $124,000. Wise idling would save the county another $12,000 a year. And not having to rent as many fleet vehicle downtown parking spaces will save the county additional thousands. So third, by defining standard vehicle specifications, these fleet policies increase the vehicle maintenance and repair process. It's streamlined, inventory is reduced, and repair time is reduced. So those are all additional benefits to all of us who want to have our vehicles to do our job. The fourth policy is one of good public policy and promotes the county's image in leading in resource conservation. A motor pool and the reallocation of vehicles could save the county close to $500,000 a year. The most fuel-efficient car may be the one not purchased. Whoops. Can I go backwards? So, I wanted to speak a little bit about the content of the policies, but not go into too much detail. It's in your packet, and I don't want to go into too many nuts and bolts, pun intended on their content, but I do want to just outline some of what's in there. So the policies establish roles and responsibilities. They describe the policy for vehicle maintenance, repair, and scheduling. They identify specifications and practices for vehicle acquisition, retirement, and disposition. They outline the uses of the GPS-generated information. They set annual utilization targets and retirement eligibility mileage. They provide for the opportunity for reallocation and allocation of underutilized vehicles, and they promote fuel conservation with standard vehicle groups. The concepts are embedded in 5 specific policy statements. The document also has sections that include the definitions, the applicability, and the roles and responsibilities. The appendix has the standards and specifications. One of the key aspects that this policy introduces that's a new concept is the idea of a motor pool. Some of you may be familiar with that, if you've worked for the state or know people who work for the state. The intent of the motor pool is to have vehicles available in the right size and the right number at the right place. The motor pool allows for a greater variety of vehicles to be available. Do you need a truck? Do you need a sedan? Do you need an SUV? Are you traveling in the metro area? Are you traveling to the New Mexico County's annual meeting or Edge in Albuquerque? With a motor pool, employees can have access to the vehicle quantities and varieties at times of needs, without having the need for each department or elected official office to purchase vehicles that aren't used during other times of the year. As soon as the charging station kinks get worked out, the county's only electric vehicle will be the first vehicle dedicated to the downtown motor pool. It can be reserved through SharePoint, and we hope that this vehicle gets used daily. The motor pool is also taking donations, perhaps as a result of the consolidation into the new buildings. Some departments or elected officials would be willing to have one or two of their vehicles donated to the motor pool. The benefit of doing so is in part that it can reduce the office's or department's responsibility on maintenance, acquisition, and perhaps allow dedicated funding streams to be diverted to other priorities. So here is a Venn diagram that shows to whom the fleet policies apply, in particular, in this case, to acquisition. We wrestled quite a bit with this as a team, and this is where the policies lie now. So the idea is that the blue circle shows all the agencies and elected official offices and departments that will follow the acquisition process as outlined in here. What you can see is that fire emergency vehicles are not included, the sheriff is not included, but everyone else is, including the non-emergency vehicles of fire. And as a side note, the fleet constitutes about 700 pieces of equipment. The policies only apply to all the vehicles, and we're going to work with Public Works to develop internal fleet policies for the remaining section of the fleet that's not covered by these policies. So that would be heavy equipment, yellow iron, and other motorized apparatus. Okay. So here's a flow diagram that shows the acquisition request process as proposed in the fleet policy. First, a standard vehicle group is determined by the verb. This is essentially the idea that the verb decides what kind of vehicles should be made available for purchase in any given year in multiple classes. A light truck, a light duty truck, a sedan, perhaps a small SUV, and other, a van for transporting seniors, and those are chosen based on criteria like best in class, safety, features, gas mileage, fuel efficiency, etc. And then the requests come in after that, and it's as a result of a survey. The people who want to buy a vehicle fill out a survey, which might ask questions like, is the vehicle a replacement vehicle? Does it have an independent funding source? And that's approved by the elected official or department management. The request is then analyzed by the fleet manager and the data manager. The request goes to the verb, who matches the best vehicle to the needs expressed in the request, recommends acquisition, may recommend reassignment or underutilization of vehicles, and that request ends up going to the usual route, the elected officials, the county manager, the finance and budget, and ultimately the board for you guys to approve as part of the budget process. So that's how the acquisition request process happens. Okay. So should you decide to approve this plan today, which I hope you will, this is what will happen next. The county manager will establish the verb with membership from diverse departments and elected officials. and a union representative. The verb establishes the standard vehicle group. We'll develop the vehicle acquisition questionnaire with the CIP committee. We'll train the employees and the supervisors on the policies. And the county employees will submit their vehicle requests by January 2020. And the verb will meet and decide on the vehicle requests and also potential reallocation. So, in conclusion, I wonder whether this is the perfect time for us to be using the Marie Kondo lens to our fleet and ask ourselves, do we really need all these vehicles? Do they serve our purpose? Can our life be enriched with less vehicles? And are our vehicles perhaps holding on to a time past when our business needs and practices were different? Anybody here in team want to add anything?
Do they bring us joy? That's a great.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Hanson.
the electric vehicle.
Chair, that totally.
Electric chair. That's her chair. That's the electric chair. That's the one she's sitting on.
The electric vehicle brings me joy. So, how many vehicles do we own?
700.
A total
In our
of-
fleet is 700, over
Seven,
700,
yeah,
so
okay,
that's not just
700.
vehicles.
So that
So
includes
it's heavy
fire trucks
equipment.
and backhoes and
And
Right.
graders
road
and
graders and snow plows and
all, everything.
and water
And the
tanks.
sheriff?
That includes the sheriff, yes.
Okay,
It's total of 11, including sheriffs and heavy equipment.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Dean.
1100.
So what's the 700?
Okay, so I just thought that the number was maybe a little low. So there's the sheriff's cars. So are they under this policy also?
The part of the policy that has to do with their maintenance is, because Fleet provides the maintenance service to them. The part that has to do with acquisition is not.
Okay, so then we don't have any, they have to write their own policies about acquisition? Or
I
they
believe
don't
they
even have to
actually
write their
have
own?
some, was my understanding.
Huh?
I thought that they had some.
Okay, so like Los Angeles has bought an entire electric fleet. So I know we're at 7,000 feet, you know, but Los Angeles County is still a large county.
What is,
Los Angeles County is a large county.
but 7,000 feet?
Sometimes electric vehicles, like the problem with the buses in Albuquerque had to do with elevation. So sometimes elevation does affect electric vehicles. I don't know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer. I'm just interested in if they're able to do it, are we able to do it? You know, is my real question. So with this verb group, will they will use the policies that, you know, we've set out in the Paris Accord and et cetera to buy electric vehicles will be the first choice, or will that depend on the group, and how will that be initiated? That we buy the most fuel efficient vehicle possible for the group.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, the vehicles will need to be matched to the need. And so I think the verb will need to have discussion about what examples are is it appropriate to have an electric vehicle meet the need, and that will determine whether the car would be determined to be an electric vehicle.
Okay, I'll give up the floor for a minute.
Are there other questions,
I
Commissioner
have a question.
Garcia?
So what's interesting is under President Clinton's administration as into making diesel vehicles emissions, right? And so you can go up to a diesel vehicle today and you can rub the tailpipe and there's no black smoke at all. Because of the emissions that they imposed on it back in the days. And so I'm okay with electric vehicles, but one of the things that I'm interested in is at the Chavez Center, whenever PNM had the ribbon cutting and with Mayor Gonzalez was there and about our charging stations we have out there, is how often are they used? And is it worth it, not worth it? Where are we at? You know, sure we can buy a sheriff's vehicle fleet. I know Eric has done an excellent job as into GPS. We actually, probably about 6 years ago, we actually, this GPS every single car. Great, let's do it. But who actually monitors that, and who's actually following what's happening with it? Some departments do, some departments don't. So, as into the electric vehicle, I get it. How?
So-
Sure.
So Madam Chair, the charging stations that were installed outside, there are 2 on the upper deck. And there's one just like that, but not open to the public on the lower deck of parking for staff vehicles. The units were were activated, and their location was made known to folks who have electric vehicles who use the ChargePoint network. That's the brand of this. Since they were lit up a week ago, we've had 4 sessions, just random folks coming in and charging. They look at an app, they see what the price is, and they connect their vehicle for a couple of hours. So we've had
So
you
we're
know,
paying for that.
one on Saturday, a couple last week. So in the week and a half they've been out there with no promotion at all, just being posted to the network that this is a vehicle on this network that's available and here are the prices. Folks show up, they park, they plug in, they go to Tia's or whatever they do and come back. So kind of surprised that the uptake has been there. And these were actually, I just walked by, these were out of town folks, out of state folks, because I just happened to walk by and see a Texas plate or a Colorado plate. So I believe that the use is there, the number of vehicles are there, and we've established it so that folks can't come here and sponge energy, so as to not have to deal with anti-donation. But it's actually cheaper to charge than it is to park at a meter on the street. So I'm not sure if people will pick that up.
Killing two birds with one stone.
But I was actually pleasantly surprised that there was that kind of response. With respect to the GPS data, I set up that website and have been maintaining it. It was originally intended not to be a management tool that could be misused by folks. Folks saying, "Oh, I wonder where Eric is. Oh, let's go look for him."
Could be used for that.
So if there was a complaint by a citizen or a call came in, then we would research and say, this vehicle was not driving over the speed limit, here's the evidence, or the opposite. And so it's kind of been an as needed basis, but with this policy lays out is a way to kind of formalize the proper distribution of the data that's collected to managers, just to say, hey, if there are folks who are idling their vehicles for 4 hours while they're on a job site or whatever, you know, the system can automatically send information out. And so the establishment of this vehicle policy will kind of formalize that proper use of that data that is collected. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. So one of the key things that you said that's important is data, right? Data. We actually did this probably when Commissioner Campos was here. That's why we have the Prius that's in the back there, because he actually initiated Let's Go Green. And so we did this prior to Manager Miller. And so we moved forward with this. Dropped, right? So because it's all about the data, right? So how can we actually prove to the taxpayer, not department heads, to the taxpayer that this is the right way to go? Because it's about data, right? It's about the whole, you have cars that are out there, but it's all, how do we realize that, yes, we actually have certain vehicles that need to drive back and forth? And how do we realize that this car can drive 200 miles and needs a charging station? Where do you charge that? You gotta figure that out, right? And so, yes, we have a public works department that actually needs diesel trucks, right, because they have to pull stuff, so data is very important, key. I get the whole green aspect of it, so that's why are we going the right way or not, in the right direction, and I understand the whole green stuff, recycling, I get it, so it's like, it's all about data, and the next 4 months, tell us what data is. Next 6 months, tell us what data is are we saving money, not saving money? Like I said, we have a Prius that sits back in there, that's, you know, we actually bought that Prius under Commissioner, Paul Campos. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Royball.
Are you guys, it came in a little bit late, but are we looking at putting more charging stations? Or are we just looking at getting more vehicles that are electric vehicles for the county?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Royball, so we have the 6 stations here, we have 1 at the Public Safety Complex and 2 at Public Works. So right now, with only having 1 electric vehicle, the next move would be to buy the electric vehicles rather than charging stations. But you're absolutely right that they need to be on par, right? They need to be, as we increase our electric fleet, we need to make sure they also have a place to charge. So and what we're talking about today is not either. It's not either actually about buying particular vehicles or about putting in charging stations. It's about laying the framework in which those decisions can be made in the future.
So we would actually get more electric vehicles, and we would figure out how many charging units we need based off of how much time that we need to charge them and how many vehicles that, you know, basically you're gonna have to calculate how much time that the vehicle will stay charged for each employee, and then how many charging stations dependent on how many vehicles that we do get, right, at some point.
I'm sure.
And as far as, is that gonna be open to the general public to use for charging their vehicle like the one downstairs?
Madam Chair, the one on the lower deck is a staff only, it's not broadcast on that ChargePoint network. The 2 on the upper deck, however, are accessible by the public and so can be used and cost the public to be able to charge. And so let's imagine that, I believe Claudia in the course of going through this with an elected official, he indicated that he may wish to, that electric vehicles would be suitable for the purposes of his staff. So he may request acquisition of a few electric vehicles. And so that would bring the pool to 3. And then it may be that one of them, or 2 of them charge up one night and one of them charges up the other night. And so there's this is something that is not super difficult to manage, because we're starting in a building mode.
Yeah, and it's sort of my, I realize that the general public can't come here and charge their vehicles for free because of an app probably that kind of ties in with our equipment that they'll get charged for plugging their vehicle. And you did indicate earlier that it was cheaper to plug in than park, so how does the city feel about us providing these areas?
I don't know until they watch the stream that they're aware of that.
Yeah,
But I believe they share the same energy efficiency goals that we do.
No, it was more of a joke.
And that is, no, but that is something that we use the recommendations of the charging network to set prices, but those can be changed pretty quickly. If you stay for a long time, it bumps up, so.
I'm gonna go to Gary because I think he is on this topic.
And Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that the policies are not to say whether we're gonna get X number of more electric vehicles or not. It is to set up a process by which we make informed decisions about the vehicles we bring into our fleet. And that we have looked at the capacity inside of fleet to manage all those vehicles. And that we make decisions based on the needs of all of the customers that we have inside of Public Works. So it's marrying those two so that we're making good decisions instead of just saying, what kind of car do you want, Greg? But it really is a different kind of process that's better informed.
Thank you. Commissioner Moreno?
I understand that, thank you, Madam.
Yes, of course.
Sure. The system is set up so that every car is tracked. Is that right?
Chair,
GPS.
Commissioner, yes.
And the system has the capacity to see who is driving faster than the speed limit?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, yes, there are two
And-
two reports that get routinely sent out. One is about speed and the other one is about idling. So all of the managers get those two reports monthly.
Monthly. And the basis of what kind of a car do you need? How are we gonna manage that system? I'm not gonna big a truck on stuff in a truck to get something that you need for a bicycle.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, yes, so we anticipate having the questionnaire by which you request a vehicle describe the kind of uses you need for it versus I want X and Y car. So often, for example, people are field folks, so they need a pickup truck. However, they might once a year go to Mexico Edge or to Mexico counties, and therefore they also request an extended cab to be able to carry four people in that vehicle. So if we identify that their use for carrying passengers only happens a week of the year, then the recommendation would be, for example, for that vehicle, for them to get a motor pool vehicle for that instance of use and stick with a 2-passenger pickup truck for their daily use. That's an example of how we would tailor the car to somebody's needs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson.
So, first of all, I wanna thank you all for the hard work that you have put into this. Because I have read this all last night and I tried to read it online, but I'm better reading it on paper. So it was interesting. So one of the things that I did see in here is that each department has a person that is specified to be in charge of the car. And it said in the first line that they were responsible to keep it clean, to keep it maintained, to make sure it had gas. So I remember this discussion of the policy when we were talking about it before, that it said that the car must be washed twice a year. And so I want to make sure that, you know, we're paying attention to the care and maintenance of the car, and that the car gets washed and cleaned kind of on a regular basis. And so and I did see that there was that first line, or I think it was A. I did not highlight it, but I remember reading it briefly. I just want to make sure that it's clear that, you know, they wash the car also, just because I do drive the Prius on a regular basis, and sometimes it's not very clean. And so I think and that's not anybody's fault, because there's nobody really assigned to it, like what this process that you're created now in this fleet management policy, which I think is good, because you have designated somebody to be in charge of it. And I think that was one of the pieces that was missing, and so I wanna congratulate you on that. And congratulate you on the whole policy, because I do agree with you, even though it doesn't designate which person gets an electric vehicle, or they get, you know, a four-wheel truck vehicle. There is this way to create who gets what kind of car and what it's used for, and I think that that's really important, that we think about those classifications for each place. So thank you.
Are there other questions or comments to the point, Commissioner Garcia?
Just really quick, Madam Chair, in regards to the fleet policy, this gentleman here, we all have a new logo, right? So these days, more and more you see all these county vehicles with a new logo, right? So who's in charge of putting that logo on every single vehicle? Thank you for doing that, because we have a new logo, and every single vehicle should be marked to that logo, no matter what it is, unless you do some sort of risk management or whatnot. But
Yes.
thank you for doing that. And another thing that we talked about with Eric, probably about a year ago, is the GPS. That GPS can actually have the ability to say, you know, this vehicle needs an oil change, it needs an oil change, it needs an oil change. And it'll let you know, his vehicle needs an oil change, come in, bring it in. And sometimes change is hard. You know, and change is hard because we're this building, but we have the technology we have these days is you can program that vehicle, as Eric knows, and I'm sure your manager Miller knows as to, you know what? You can, so I think it's great that we're talking about this because we have to move to the next level, right?
Because Commissioner Garcia, it actually does say in the policy that they're responsible for putting on the logo on the car. I read that last night.
Who follows up with that?
Well, that's
I
kind of
think
a
I
level
get
of
it, I get it.
detail that I think we could leave, since we really wanna focus on this at the policy level and get this accomplished. Are there other,
No,
yes, Commissioner Hanson?
I would like to make a motion to approve the fleet policy. Let me get the language up if I need to.
Adopting the fleet
I'm
management,
looking for my
number 4.
number 4.
It's in,
No, that's not it.
Would you like me to read it for your resolution adopting the center?
it's the top one.
Oh, a resolution adopting Santa Fe County fleet policies and procedures and repealing and replacing Santa Fe County Resolution number 2007-142 and 2008-13.
I have a motion, do I have a second? Thank you, I have a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye, any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much, and I just wanna echo everybody's thanks for the hard work on this, I think it really moves us forward.
Congratulations.
Madam Chair.
Madam
Yes,
Chair, Commissioners,
yes, please,
we will keep plugging away and changing down all the details and all these things.
you're doing a great job, thank you very much.
We just, when they're coming in, if we grab them, we do.
Nice job, thank you for coming.
We just passed resolution 2019-142.
Thank you very much. So that takes us to presentations. We have a presentation regarding the adult detention facilities. Oh, we did that. Well, never mind, we did that. That takes us to matters from the county manager. Manager Miller.
Number 5.
Oh, who cares about number 5? Thank you very much. Matters of public concern, thank you so much. It was just up off the screen and I jumped right ahead. So is there anybody here from the public, including in any of the conference rooms that are broadcast, we're getting this being broadcast, who want to address the commission? And I think we might need to nobody's down and any of the officers. So seeing nobody here from the public, I will close matters of public concern and go on to matters from the county manager. Manager Miller?
Madam Chair, first item, legislative updates. We had initially tried to reserve
A space on January 23rd for a legislative breakfast.
the legislative breakfast, but it turns out everybody had that idea.
Everybody other.
The Association of Counties and the Supreme Court have breakfast that morning.
So let's pick another morning.
Yes.
So then we thought that the next day, Friday the 24th would be good, except the concern about Friday, particularly that early in the session, is that they don't have committee meetings typically, so they go home for the weekend. Now, we're Santa Fe, so don't have real far to go. And in some ways it might work, but in other ways it might not. It is incredibly difficult to get all of our legislators together. As you know, last year when we had the dinner, we had several from the southern part of the county didn't come, northern part of the county that didn't come, and even the main speaker at the house didn't come because it happened to be his daughter's birthday. So,
I presume the week before, I mean, you've gone through,
also we were concerned the breakfast would be also difficult for Commissioner Roybal to make. But we're concerned that having a dinner again, we get maybe half at best. Sometimes we've had even less than that.
yes, Commissioner Hanson.
Rena from the speaker's office reached out to me and asked me specifically to please let her know as soon as possible what day we were gonna choose, because the speaker said that he really wanted to be there. So I just wanted to share that with you.
That's always good to hear.
Yeah, and it's just, it's difficult. We pick a date that works for the board, it doesn't work for certain legislators.
So are you looking for brainstorming, or do you already have
I
some
think we're looking for
suggestions?
brainstorming because the other thing we thought was maybe the day before, the Wednesday before.
And
The
that's
week before?
No,
the first week, we're hoping to maybe target the first week because all of the legislators will already be in town, so we're hoping to catch them before they start their
Go home for
activities,
the-
or their activities of the day.
So it starts on the 20th, so you're talking about, is that January the 22nd, Wednesday the 22nd?
Yes, it starts on the 21st.
starts Tuesday the 21st.
Yeah,
So we could try, instead of a sit-down dinner, we could do a reception. It's just, like I said, what's worked for us in the past is if we could do a breakfast, because we were able to get them all together for a breakfast at the Capitol. That's been our most successful as far as attendance. That was our best for getting all of them there for, even if it was 30 minutes. We were able to get them all there for that. I think 2 years we did that, we had 90% of our legislators. The evenings, they're nice, but we get a lot less attendance.
It just seems that like a breakfast would get everybody sitting down and talking, which is part of the point is to have certain objectives accomplished, right? We wanna tell them certain things and lay certain, as opposed to a reception where we're all milling around and talking to each other. But you can still
We
ring
also
the gong
like-
and get them to sit down, but it's a little harder.
But
We also tried to make sure that all of you can be there. So
What's
this is
that
our
the second
dilemma.
week of the session? I mean, the first
They'll be
week,
crazy already.
if you know, the New Mexico counties is here, we have meetings that week. I mean, I'm just brainstorming, and so I'm just, like, maybe the Monday of the following week, the beginning of the week, and the first Monday, and good morning, and I mean, cause they don't start until Tuesday. And so
So
it
you're
would
talking
be,
about the Monday before they start?
no,
the
I'm
Monday
talking about the
after.
Monday,
The
the first
27th.
Monday, yeah, I guess
The
whatever
27th,
day.
as opposed to the 19th, okay.
Just as an option, you don't have all the New Mexico County people in town. Not that that makes that much difference, cause most of them are part of our delegation. But
Question, and you guys might know better than I will the legislators already be here that morning, or you think they'll be here on Monday?
Well, I
Or
think
will they come Monday
for the most
evening?
part for us, them coming isn't so much an issue because they live close by. So I think, or leaving, we're not like the other counties that everybody actually does go home and doesn't come back. But it is something, just whether they would even want to bother to come in on Friday, I think is an issue. Yeah, that was our, we thought Thursday was great,
Okay.
so did everybody else.
Yeah.
Commissioner Garcia?
So I have a question, so 30 days is gonna fly by.
Right, and we wanna do it
Right,
early.
and right, they already know, Manager Miller knows this better than all of us is. They know what they're gonna do, they know what's happening, and so I guess what do we wanna accomplish out of it? Tell them our 5 priorities, or do you wanna push legislation, or what do we wanna accomplish out of this breakfast? Let's all sit down and, hi, how are you? We all know who they are, they all know who we are, it's like, so what do we wanna accomplish out of it?
Madam Chair, I think that our purpose for doing this has been not just talking about our 5 priorities, but also our ICIP, what's on our ICIP. It's frustrating in that, you know, we did try to talk to them about, last year about not putting nonprofit appropriations on there, and we had a whole discussion about that with them, and they did it anyway, so that didn't seem to produce any great result. What I think has worked well, particularly if there's legislation, although this is a financial session, if there's been legislation that they really want to understand, so when there's been tax reform bills that have gone through, they like to hear about what is our position on that stuff. When they did revisions to Soul Community, we had those legislators who really wanted to understand the impact to the county when the state changed those laws. They wanted to talk to us. So this year, I don't think there's as much relative to the New Mexico counties having a lot of things. We adopted those resolutions last meeting, and they're primarily financial. Most of what they said were priorities for trying to get the legislature to put additional funding into House Bill 2 for, you know, EMS, for jail, for behavioral health issues. So I think kind of reiterating to them why that's important to Santa Fe County as well as other counties. That's one of the things that we do, talking about if we have any legislative priorities, what's been important to us, what we've passed as resolutions. And then, like you said, our top 5 priorities, I think it was effective last year in getting them to put money to solar and to the sewer system. Those both were in our top priorities, and we did get some fairly substantial, and AMIT last year. We don't have that as much of a priority, but we did spend a lot of time pushing those priorities. So I think this year predominantly be, based on what we know so far, will predominantly be any capital outlay requests. I also wanted to, instead of just our top 5 priorities, look at what's in their individual districts that's on our ICIP and try something akin to what the speaker said the city of Santa Fe does, some kind of grid, if you wanna call it that, a chart that says, hey, if each one of you put in this amount for this item, that would be really helpful to us. That would get us, you know, a phase fully funded or something like that. So that was what I was hoping, and that we would also push those items that are New Mexico County priorities, because those also benefit us. If they put more money to EMS, if they put more money to behavioral health, if they put more money to jail, that's more money to us on an operating basis.
So, okay, Commissioner Garcia.
Just really quick, I definitely follow Manager Miller on that. One of the things I would like staff to actually look at is what Mayor Tim Keller is actually introducing for Bernalillo County's or Albuquerque's legislation. One of the things that he's actually introducing is behavioral health. He wants to get some operating money, as you know, more than any of us, Manager Miller's into. So do we actually partner up with him and say, this is a good behavioral health initiative? So that's kind of where, that I'd like to say we would like to do. We all get capital outlay, we don't have, we don't, that's what they want with the district, I get it. And one of the other things that is kind of challenges to me is I understand we follow the New Mexico County's agendas and to their priorities. And with all due respect to New Mexico County, sometimes they deal with a lot of the rural county areas. In us, Bernalillo County, you know, Doniana, Sandoval, we're not that really rural area. And so, like I said, like kind of maybe partnering up with the mayor of Albuquerque as into, he has some good ideas for behavioral health, right? Operating costs, that we can utilize that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, we are working with, and we did last year, we worked with Bernalillo County, particularly relative to something down in in Edgewood. And I think that's one area for whether the operating funds go to Bernalillo County and they operate the facility, or whether we receive funds and put them into the facility. I think that's one area where we had not initially plan to have any operating costs, but we're putting in to improve the facility, and then Bernalillo was gonna operate it. But I think going in together with Bernalillo County, to our legislators, particularly in the southern part of the state, that would be really beneficial to get perhaps funding specific to that facility.
So
So what
with
about the date?
with respect to you mentioned a few times that doing a dinner might not attract as many people, but that's probably the only option if we wanna make it more convenient for Commissioner Roybal. So I think our two best options are dinner or breakfast, obviously, right? And
Or even just a reception with hors d'oeuvres.
Madam Chair?
but okay, so that would go,
That was my second thought, either
So-
try it for breakfast
so-
on that Monday or Tuesday or
which Monday, the
the
one
one
before it
that
starts?
Commissioner Hanson mentioned the following week.
Right,
Try for a breakfast there or a reception, cause the
That Monday
committee,
evening.
I'm thinking their committee hearings still won't run really late that second week. And so
at least very early in the week.
the
I
third
would-
and fourth week they will.
Yeah, well, I agree with that just from past history. So I mean, if we've ruled out the Wednesday before, for whatever reasons. No, we already ruled out Thursday because it's being taken, but if the Wednesday before the 22nd, the day after those start was brought up and nobody really, we didn't actually formally accept it or rule it out, but I would think that Wednesday or the following Monday, Commissioner Hanson's suggestion would make sense. Commissioner Roybal, you just raised your hand.
I actually just, if there's a time where the commissioners can be there, whether it's breakfast or lunch, just schedule that time. Figure out, if it's a breakfast or lunch, like I said, if we could do a breakfast from 7:30 to 9, I would be fine with that. If we could do a lunch from 11 o'clock to 12:30, I'd be fine with that as well.
You mean you could potentially attend?
I would be there.
And what about dinner?
I'm fine with dinner. Dinner's never been really
That's not a problem.
Yeah.
I just think the second day of the session is not a good idea.
Right, it's too early, you think?
It's too early and there's too many people in town. There are so many people who have come into town from all over the state, that
It's competition.
If
I think that's a strong point, so why don't we, if we go with Monday, which event is going to be, the advantage of either an early evening like 5:27 and 3/4, with hors d'oeuvres it's a little less formal and you can make it early. So if people think that's an advantage over dinner, and Monday, if people are away for the weekend, breakfast might be problematic, although I don't know, but Manager Miller keeps saying most of our delegates are local, and that's the truth, so I don't know how big a drawback even breakfast on Monday would be, so opinions on, I just think lunches in the middle of the day is hard to do.
No, I think lunch is not a good idea. But I do think that early afternoon, 5:30, reception, hors d'oeuvres, sit down for 40 minutes, talk to them for 40 minutes and then get up and talk some more, or, mingle, but I really feel strongly that we need to present our agenda and present the items that we want them to know we want, and that needs to be condensed and.
Yeah, we all obviously do talk a lot, but having this unified meeting has always been valuable. I think to not do it starts breaking down
It's a
that the flow of information.
We could do a poll, we could send a poll out to say to the legislators, Monday morning or Monday evening.
Commissioner Garcia, I
So
saw a
really,
hand
so
over there.
is it okay to actually have staff just give us three possibilities so we can go fire?
Well, I think we've narrowed it down to the
Monday.
Monday breakfast or dinner.
So why don't we do dinner first and breakfast second?
Okay, I'm good with that.
Just, if everybody
Thank you.
goes, they have some
January
sort of an
22nd.
organized event Monday night, we can shift it.
And we can't do it Tuesday because that's BCC.
Yeah.
So that was why
Good point.
Monday is.
Maybe we can invite him to our
Oh, the hell
BCC
with
meeting.
BCC.
We've done that before.
Right?
We can always invite them at the meeting,
We
on
can have
Monday,
others
say,
at BCC.
you're welcome to come and see our new building, since many of them didn't get to come.
Okay, so we have that semi-settled. What else do we have to talk about for the session?
I would say if there's items that you individually or collectively want to see us either bring a resolution forward or that you know that you would like to pursue funding through capital outlay so that we can make sure we get those, even if they're not, there's the obvious top 5. And we already adopted those, but if there are other items that you in your district that particular legislators that you would like us to put, cause I think we'll do more of a chart or graph. I mean, last year we didn't just request funding for our top 5. Some years we've done that. But last year we actually went for funding for our top 5, and then we picked things that were on the ICRP or projects that we already had that we needed additional funding for that were in legislative districts and commission districts. And we put letters to each legislator with those things that were particular to their district. So we had our county-wide, and then we had requests for funding particular to their legislative districts. I know that the speaker said, oh, you don't make it easy like the city makes it easy in a chart. But fact of the matter was, we did list out our top 5, how much we'd like from each one, and then we gave them a letter and we said, this is the full project amount, but what we'd like from you is $50,000 or $100,000. So I just wanna know if there are things that are in your district that you would like us to make sure we put, not just in a letter, but in a chart. We're gonna try it every possible way we can present.
But we're thinking about, we'll get with you afterwards, right?
Yeah, you can let me know,
And
you can let TJ know,
Right.
cause we're gonna compile
We will
that,
all do that.
and by the beginning of January, we will have all of that lined out.
And,
Yes,
Madam
go ahead,
Chair,
sir.
I just wanna, I wanna say, we were listening to Joseph talk this morning about, or early afternoon, about the 400,000 that he needs for the meters to install the solar. So is that his CIP, but it's the county housing development that needs the money? So I'm just asking how we separate that out, or do we separate it out, or is it part of our request?
Madam Chair, just really quick on that, Madam Chair, if I may. So as the staff that actually did this for many years, I think, as Manager Miller knows, all of her staff needs to go through her. And so us policymakers need to ask what Manager Miller wants or we want. And so personally, I don't think it's good for staff to go there and ask for whatever they want through the state for the session. So I think they should.
I didn't hear that, but I'm asking, how
No,
do.
that's my opinion for what it's worth.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, they're always the county, if it's something for the housing authority, it's a Board of County Commission priority, and it comes to the county.
Yeah.
Okay,
It doesn't
thank you.
go directly, they don't do it
Yeah,
separate.
they're not a separate.
So we've had housing authority requests in our top 5, it's been there
Okay.
before. Unfortunately, you would think that's something that the legislators want to give money to, but they have not been very, they have not been very generous to the housing projects. I don't know why, but whether we've proposed improvements to the roads and sidewalks, whether we propose new roofs, it's not something that's gotten funded. Fairgrounds, they liked the fairgrounds. They gave us $600,000 towards the fairgrounds when we redid the cooperative extension office. That's been one that's been popular. Solarizing fire stations, or county buildings has been they've been pretty responsive to contributing to that. Typically, they like to appropriate to the nonprofits, and we get the pleasure of receiving those funds and having to take on those projects.
So there's always this strategy of asking for other things that open up our budget to do this sort of thing. Commissioner Hassan.
So since Senator Stefanik has familiarity with the housing authority, maybe there's a little more opening for, since she has been a county commissioner, somebody who I believe was very supportive of the housing authority would recognize that was an important need, but I understand I hear what you're saying.
There just seems to be things that they like to direct their capital outlay funds to, and things that are not as popular to them. The recreation facilities, they tend to like to appropriate to recreation facilities, so like the Pewaukee ball fields. They down in Albuquerque, they love to give to every baseball field in Albuquerque. You'll see like a list of every baseball field.
Because then if they get their name on the field, then it's like
they like
permanent advertising.
They like to appropriate to things that are community-based facilities, that particularly youth recreation facilities. Also roads, frequently they'll do road projects and fire station stuff. So I would just keep that in mind when you're looking at your in your individual districts. If there are things on our ICIP that are kind of fall into those categories, those are things that I think we've been pretty successful with versus our own administrative buildings or our own buildings for that matter. That facilities that the communities use, yes, but our buildings, like DAs, I know that they put in for quite a bit and got essentially nothing. The courts in the past, if they've gotten funding, our building, our responsibility, but I've noticed that even if they get legislators to appropriate, governors have vetoed that in the past. So I just keep that in mind. I could pretty much show you what doesn't make it and what does make it through the process.
And every year it's different, because we do have a few new legislators and, so, priorities change and we have a new governor, so,
New lobbyist.
So is there more on this subject that would really give us? Why don't we move on, knowing that we will all come to you and sort of put our heads together on making sure this list is good and dynamic.
Okay, and Madam Chair, just a reminder, it is just a budget session, so there won't be much that isn't directly budget related.
Right. So does that move us to the animal control ordinance? Is that what you wanted to do next, or miscellaneous updates?
Wanted to do?
Yeah, well, think of that term loosely.
I think Commissioner Garcia would like to be in on that, so maybe we need to get him in here to let him know we're talking about that. Besides
Or we could
myself.
do a few miscellaneous updates if he's.
Let's see. My
Well, he seems to be
other
coming in.
miscellaneous updates I think might be something he's interested in.
I thought he was walking in, but he's getting out of it.
As well. I could give you this one, so obviously, Thursday and Friday are our Thanksgiving holiday, dates. So the county, offices are closed this Thursday and Friday. Transfer stations are also closed Thursday and Friday, but will be open Saturday and Sunday. We've already, posted that and sent that information out in a press release to make sure that people are aware of that. Also, we moved payday from Friday to Wednesday since the offices are closed. So,
So we
we'll
get
get their
paid 2 days
paychecks,
earlier.
yes, 2 days early.
Time is money, or something like that.
Well, one would think that, but interest earnings in the bank account are negligible, so I don't think we'll notice anything different from a payroll happening a day and a half early. My other well, we'll do the animal control and then I wanted to discuss the solid waste ordinance briefly so that I can get some thoughts from you guys about bringing something back to the board in December.
Thank you.
So real quick, Madam Chair, sorry, just doing a couple of things, I guess there's a lockdown, he's locked down at Santa Fe High School, so I was just talking with the superintendent, but for the most part, everybody's fine, and so they're just trying to figure out what's happening there, so that's why I'm just dealing with this stuff, but.
Moving on to animal control. I just wanted to briefly review the last few years' activity related to our animal control
That would be
ordinance to
appreciated.
reorient everyone to what we've done to date. Back in 2016, August of 2016, the Sheriff's Department and legal worked significantly with the community to develop an entire new animal control ordinance. That was brought before the board and there was a lot of community input both in favor of and against the proposed ordinance. It did not move forward, but shortly after that, in February of 2017, there was an amendment brought forward to adjust our fees and make some minor revisions to the ordinance, and that was approved in February of 17. Part of that amendment prohibited chaining of animals, and it was delayed in its implementation, and then we adopted a subsequent ordinance further delaying implementation of the chaining prohibition. Eventually, that did go into effect in January of 18 and is in effect today. We also put in place an animal control committee in March of 2017 and tasked that committee with making two proposals to the BCC. One having to do with improvements to our barking regulations and noise disturbance regulations within the animal control ordinance. And the second was to further clarify our chaining prohibition. The Animal Control Committee met and developed a proposed ordinance for the commission to consider. You were briefed on that ordinance in somewhere around November of 2017. But the ordinance was never brought forward for action to the commission. And so that's sort of what we've done in the last few years, and it's unclear what the next steps should be and whether further drafting or that particular ordinance might come back before the commission.
Okay, go ahead.
And Madam Chair, I just wanted to add to that, that I believe that part of the reason that so the ordinance was brought, or some of the recommended changes by the task force were brought to the board, kind of briefed on what it was, but at the time, the outgoing sheriff, I think, had concerns about adopting any major changes to the animal control ordinance without the participation of the incoming sheriff. So that was like in June of 2018, and at that point, Sheriff Garcia knew he was leaving, and I think we knew that Sheriff Mendoza would be coming in because I think he had won the primary, but Sheriff Garcia didn't want us to make a lot of changes because he wanted to make sure that Sheriff Mendoza had some say in what changes would be put into effect in the animal control ordinance, since he has to administer those changes through his staff. And Sheriff Mendoza wanted to be here today, but he wasn't available. I said we weren't going to be making any decisions. We were just going to bring you guys up to speed as to where this was left off and answer any questions that you had, and then make sure that the sheriff is available before we take any direction to change the ordinance so that he's a participant in that process.
Commissioner Moreno?
We met, my liaison and I met with the undersheriff and the whole animals staff, three guys. Maybe it was one woman. but in either case, they have a lot of experience that I was not previously, that I was, it was available. I was impressed with the data that they have been collecting and how they respond to things. And we all know the things, you know, the dog bites somebody, and then the dog runs away, and who's gonna get the dog? And all the multiple issues that dogs, if they are, especially if they are mean and dangerous, and a process to take people to court, basically, if needed, or fine, or whatever. I'm not gonna do it here, but they were very receptive. We've had in El Dorado a couple of years ago, have had a mean dog, a biting dog, running dogs at large, and that's and people need to take care of their dogs, especially if they're threatening, and that would be a help in that area. But to be continued.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson.
So, I remember that, a deputy manager, briefed us, and, it was kind of just a briefing, and we didn't get the, I've looked through a number of my notes for recommendations from the committee, and I don't remember what the recommendations were, and I haven't been able to find them, so I would like to see that again. And
That would be very helpful.
And I'm wondering if we could, if we needed to reconvene the committee, but I don't know if that's necessary yet. But I would agree with Commissioner Moreno about vicious dogs. I have had numerous issues in the Agua Fria Village area about roaming, vicious dogs, killing other dogs. We have had to go to court over it. So that is definitely a concern to me, is the vicious dog issue, and how we are going to deal with that. I did hear from somebody that possibly we would think about doing a leash law in different areas of the county, or think about it, but I think a meeting with the sheriff and working with the sheriff is really important, because they are the ones who have to enforce a lot of these rules and regulations and go out and deal with the people. The barking, I'm completely sympathetic. I think we need to look at, see what the committee recommended on barking, and then how can we, if that's something we can implement. I know that we are different than the city, but in my district, I have areas that are right next to the city, and then it gets very complicated because the city has a slightly different way of dealing with barking dogs than we do, and if we could meld that a little bit more, especially in the urban areas, like barking dogs out in Glorietta, where the house is 5 miles, the next house is 5 miles away, is a completely different story than a barking dog that is right next to, you know, the house is 5 feet away. And so, you know, there's different things that I think we need to look at. there's also been abuse of dogs and, you know, the hoarding of dogs and hoarding of animals, which I don't know how our how our ordinance covers that. And then the other thing that people have suggested to me, or constituent, is why don't we have a 3-year licensing fee instead of a 1-year licensing fee, and why don't we raise it, and how come they only have to pay $10? And I told them that we raised our fees, and I said it used to be only $3, and the person was shocked and said, well, $10, it should be, you know, higher than that. I don't have an opinion one way or another about that at the moment, but what I do think what might be a good idea is to have a 3-year license fee. You know, we might be more successful than trying to get people to come in every year and pay a licensing fee. So that's just a few of my thoughts that I had right off the top of my head. But I do think it's something that we could have further discussion on.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Garcia?
Just really quick, I actually was not on the county commission when you all dealt with this, as Manager Miller said, a year ago, and so we obviously want to bring it back up, and it's a very touchy subject when it comes to pets. And I think one of the most important key individuals that we need to talk with is, as Manager Miller says, Sheriff Mendoza, because he's the guy. His team is the individuals that go out there and actually enforce this ordinance. Right. And I have individuals like me that represent rural areas. Madrid, you've seen some of the Facebook stuff that's gone by. That there's dogs that are actually attacking people and biting people, and so one of the hard things I spoke with Sheriff Mendoza about is whenever you go talk to those individuals about, like, they don't want to say anything. So he's like, how can we talk to these individuals if they don't want to say whose dog it is? Because nobody wants to say anything about whose dog it is, right? And so I understand the whole logistic of how it works and what needs to happen. One of the things I was pretty impressed about is individual I know lives in my Capitol High School, my district, because people say I don't hang out in my district. Yes, I do drive my district every day. Is regarding a barking dog, and it took roughly almost 9 months for the barking dog to go through municipal court, and I used to hear the dog every night. And one of the things I was impressed about is whenever actually you call animal control for the city of Santa Fe, they're on it. They make a report, second report, third report, then they give you a letter and say you need to mellow this barking dog out. That doesn't include a biting dog, but I was pretty impressed with the city of Santa Fe's ordinance as to how it works. And as you all know, because I wasn't sitting on the county commission, this is a very touchy subject. And one of the things that you need to actually realize, we all need to realize, we're policymakers. Let's bring it forward and let's make a decision, because I'm not afraid to make decisions anymore, and or not lose sleep at night. And so it's kind of I had this little dog about this big, a Yorkie. You know what happened one day? And the dog took off at 2 o'clock in the morning because she heard something outside, and somebody jumped the fence and took the dog. And what it was is, later realized this off of Governor Miles Road, is the sheriff's brother actually has a recording of a bobcat fighting with his German Shepherd. And so what I realized is that bobcat took our little dog. And okay, got it. Realize that. So it's not just the dogs, it's about, what do we do? Horses that complain. What about donkeys in my district that actually make noise all night? So it's something, don't laugh, it's something that we gotta deal with, because it's, and so where do you draw the line? And so, so as Commissioner Hanson mentioned, is so in this area we should have a leash law of 5 feet, 7 feet, I don't know, 10 feet. Should we actually make sure every single animal has a chip in it? I don't know. So guys, we all want to bring it forward. I think we're doing okay with what we're doing. Yes, you have individuals, you have certain dogs out of 10,000 dogs, maybe 2 actually bite, maybe 2 bark, but I just wanted to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Roybal.
I think one of the reasons why this issue has come forward to us at least 3 or 4 times, and whether or not we'll solve it this time remains to be seen. But there is a lot of complex issues with each community. In my area, and in urban areas as well. I mean, if you have a feral cat are a problem. If there's a feral cat that's walking on top of a wall, and the dog's barking and continuously barking, how do we punish the landowner for that feral cat? I mean, it's a very difficult situation. I think that if our officers do go out to the area to investigate and they find that, you know, maybe that is a circumstance or somebody's trying to jump over the wall, whatever it happens to be, you know, it's a very complex situation that we have to deal with. And you know, as Commissioner Garcia stated, even with other animals, horses or whatever, there are aggressive other animals like horses that do chase after people and have even trampled people in the past. So there is those situations as well. So it is one of those things where we want to make sure we do the right thing, but at the same time, even where I live, I've seen you know, pet owners, you know, tell their dog, go get them, you know, and the dog will jump off the vehicle, go get the horse, and actually herd it right down the county road back home, you know. And so it's one of those things where it is, you know, a situation where we don't want a domestic animal on our roads because of you know, our public safety concerns of a vehicle hitting these animals. I think that, you know, in my community, I've seen where, you know, there's people that have dogs that do respond to them when they say, you know, they don't need a leash. And I think that the voice command is adequate in most cases, but what happens, because animals are unpredictable when they don't respond, you know. So I really think that, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, I know as Commissioner Moreno mentioned, mean dogs or you know, I think that's something that somebody can have a mean dog, but if they're confined on their property, then of course that won't be something the county would address. If it is a dog that is very territorial and only trying to protect the property owner's land, that's another thing to consider as well. And that's the hard thing, is what happens if this animal gets out. So there's a lot of questions that we have to answer and we have to be concerned with. But I think for the most part, I think that each individual, we have to address that on an individual basis. But in my opinion, in my district, I think that voice command is adequate. And I think that there could be dog parks in different areas where maybe a leash is necessary. So I just wanted to say, you know, some of those things for the record, and I think that's why we haven't got to a point where we've been able to pin down these rules for every district. But it's something that I personally feel strongly that you know, we need to make sure that in my community, I don't think that it would be received well for people to have their dog on a leash. I think that voice command is adequate for residential communities in a rural community. So, you know, and I know that as far as barking, there's no way. I mean, I've seen skunks and other people's chickens in my yard and everything else, from, you know, cats and everything else. So I just can't see how that, you know, could be something that, you know, the property owner should be penalized for if their dog is barking, only, you know, doing their job to protect the residents that they actually live at. So those are all things that I wanted to bring forward, because I've even seen a ram attack somebody, you know, and somebody's ram, you know, start hitting the fence and bust out of the fence and start chasing somebody. And so, you know, it's one of those things where it's going to be very hard for the county to try and keep control of. So, you know, I'm interested in revisiting this and looking at what we can find, but at this point, I'm still really, I can't say that what would work in Commissioner Hanson district as far as a rural community versus, you know, a community, an urban community that lives right next to the city, how we would address both those. But, you know, I think that it'd be something that I would be willing to look at and visit in the future.
Thank you. Want to sum up a little, because it's reminded me of several things, and one of them is, I think one of the things we talked about, I think Commissioner Hanson at least alluded to it, was, you know, but this whole conversation reminds me of that, that you might need to tailor to particular areas and differentiate between highly developed areas, you know, suburban areas, high density areas that are, especially those that are proximal to the city, and more rural areas. So I think that's something we might want to consider. To be able to do that, I think we need to get updated, not just on the sequence, but on the content of what the recommendations were. so that we can revisit some of those things, and I'm not sure for after the last time we looked at this, I think we got to this point in the discussion of potentially looking at some tailoring for different areas or different circumstances, because the points are all valid. There are some places, if you're in a high enough density area where you have wandering dogs, and other than, you know, taking the law into your own hands and shooting the ones that are actually taking out all the livestock or something, you know, the attacking people, there are different issues. There are people who use dogs to run cattle and that sort of thing, and to have to leash them would be patently ridiculous. So I don't know that we actually got to being able to develop some alternatives that would differentiate between types of areas and define how to define those areas. So I think we might still be in a place where we have to do a bit of additional work. Commissioner Hanson.
So, I think having the sheriff included in the discussion is really important, cause he is the one who, you know, has to enforce it. So that's part of that discussion, because I think he has some interest. And I have also met with the sheriff and talked to him about the barking and about the vicious dogs. Vicious dogs are really a problem. But I did wanna say something about the Santa Fe Greenway. Like, that is a place where leash laws might be necessary.
Can we keep it down to the person who has, not you?
I'm just trying to.
Go ahead, you're fine. Please continue.
So just keeping in mind barking, leash law, vicious dog, you know, when we have vicious dogs and they get off of the property and they kill somebody's dog, or they bite a child and they do damage, that's serious.
Yeah, but
And so then it takes county resources then to prosecute that. And so if those rules and laws are very clearly defined, I think it's really important.
thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I think first and foremost, we need to just send out to all of you, you know, what our current ordinance is, what the proposed changes were, so that you know what those are. I think also to send out to you what's in state law. A lot of the things relative to vicious dogs and what everyone wants to do exceeds what we're allowed to do by state law.
yes.
So much of why we can only do what we can do relative to dealing with the vicious dog issue is based upon the constraints of state law.
Yes.
Secondly, I think that we haven't spent a lot of time looking at how you could do different things in different areas, because all that would do is create more boundaries of enforcement and how to enforce. I mean, let's just say if we took it based on our zoning map, you know, it'd be almost impossible for the sheriff's deputies to go, oh, well, let me take a look at the zoning map, and because you have this kind of zoning, you can have a loose dog, and because you have this kind of zoning, you can't. I just think I wanna just put out there to kind of, we have to be realistic of what we can enforce. And I'm not sure how we can make different enforcement zones. I think we've talked about this in the past, we've tried, I understand the desire to do it. It's just incredibly difficult, and it's the nature of the way our county is. You have some very rural areas, but that's where we've bumped into this, because we have multiple times tried to look at this ordinance and see how we could change it, not just in the last couple of years, but over the decades of, and the reason it doesn't get changed is because it becomes very difficult to do what individual people or board members want to do from an enforcement perspective. It just becomes incredibly difficult for the sheriff's staff to do it.
Okay, I mean, that's a good point. It does seem on the surface ridiculous to require cattle dogs to be on a leash because somebody in the middle of Santa Fe City, even though it's technically in the county, doesn't want wild dogs running in the neighborhood. So, you know, I think the idea of bringing what the current state law is, because that's an excellent point, and what we have in the ordinance so that we can review it, I think those things will then come under discussion, but I think at the very least, neither extreme is gonna get everything they want, and that's what we kinda have to keep in mind.
Yes.
And I wanna make one point, Madam Chair, is that City of Santa Fe has a completely different rule and oversight, and they can make different rules than state rules, is that not correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, depends on the item. There are some things that cities can do that counties can't, or state law. We can't pass ordinances, yeah, and I don't know whether vicious dogs laws apply inside the city limits, or whether they have the authority to create their own ordinances that would be different than state law. But in some areas they can, like as Commissioner Hamilton said, where they have home rule authority. Counties are considered an arm of the state, and we have very few areas where we can pass ordinances that would preempt state law. So,
Commissioner Moreno?
When we were in the sheriff's office, it hit me that there's a lot of common sense that needs to be applied to the situation. And once you start drawing lines on a map, this is a safe area and a mean dog area. So but those aren't it's the surprise dog attack that which happened in El Dorado recently, that it took so long to get justice, and the people have been scared, and I'd like to apply a common sense format that is flexible, that gives authority to take animals if they're seen in the act, things like that are obvious.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, yes, Rachel?
If I can just elaborate briefly on state law. When we did our amendment to our current ordinance, we incorporated the vicious law provisions of state law into our ordinance. And those are the boundaries of how we have to address vicious animal situations. And we also incorporated the Dangerous Dog Act into our ordinance. So we have two tools that we've already added that we use, and they really do form the significant boundaries of what we can and can't do within our ordinance.
Well, thank you for that, and I would also just like to, you had mentioned that we had talked about the leashing part of the law a few times, and then we actually passed it. When you send out updates on what we have, because you subsequently said we never acted on the ordinance, so that piece is a little confusing to me. So,
and Madam Chair, I can clarify that. Our current ordinance prohibits chaining of dogs and does not impose a leash requirement. It allows for voice control. What the Animal Control Committee has drafted into a proposal is a loosening of the no chaining provision.
So,
and that is
loosening
what
in what
has
way?
not been acted upon.
Loosening in what way? Making it that some people could chain sometimes, or?
Correct. There are some instances where some types of confinement by a lead would be allowed.
Tethering, yes, okay, and so that's what we have not acted on.
That is what you have not acted on.
Okay, well, that clarifies it for me.
You know, I do remember this conversation, and what it was is let's say somebody has a confinement that they have their dog in and it's jeopardized for some reason, and the dog gets out, and it's on a Wednesday and they can't take off work and they can't work on it till the weekend, then they can temporarily tether the dog until they can make those
Repairs?
yeah, and maybe it's something we have to add that they have, a month or to rectify the situation, because we don't know what they can afford at that time and if it's gonna cost, how much it's gonna cost them.
Okay,
So I think
that's a good
I think that was
clarification.
something of what had happened.
Okay, so that actually though, with those two clarifications, when you guys send us like the current status of we can at least read it and then understand the history that was and behind it and what is on the table to act on, and if we need to discuss any modifications. Is that good?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think, is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah. No, that's
Madam
excellent, because
Chair.
we weren't intending to act on it today,
No.
this was to update us so that we can all go, oh yeah, and then be thinking about it, so when we get the thing to read and it's on a future agenda, we'll be informed.
Yes, Madam Chair, I brought it up because several commissioners have been contacted by constituents that we need to do something about our vicious dogs or about our barking dogs and our ordinance. And the fact of the matter is, we did do something. We actually did change this ordinance. And the only thing we didn't do, we changed this ordinance, as Rachel said, to the extent that we could by law relative to vicious dogs. Whether we did everything to the extent we could for barking dogs, I don't know, but we also did with the tethering, we did a lot of things. And we put this task force in place because there were people who still weren't happy about the way the ordinance ultimately was approved. So we put the task force in place to kind of look up for some other alternatives. What we did not do was adopt those recommendations. I can just tell you, every time we've had this ordinance in front of the board, we always have unhappy people. Because there are people who want it to be more restrictive, and then there are people who want it less restrictive. So that's just the nature of them, and it's not just in Santa Fe County. I think every county grapples with this issue.
On that,
Thank you.
Madam Chair, David Cost, Mayor Cost said, when they dealt with the animal city ordinance, he'd never deal with it again.
So why are we bringing it up?
Madam Chair,
we
because
have to
several
do
commissioners
something.
have brought it up to me because they've received calls from their constituents, and they wanted to know what we could do, and I wanted to let you know where we were. We
Of
had
course.
left those recommended changes from the task force still on the table. And I think before, had requested, could we bring the task force back? I think before we do anything with the task force, we ought to look at what the task force had
Yes.
already done and whether you wanna make any changes based upon those recommendations, and then decide if you want the task force back to do anything in addition to that.
I would agree with that, and
Yeah,
I think
that's
that
a good idea.
recognizing that the business about never making everybody happy, I think the goal is not just to be middle of the road, like taking the average of what you hear is the answer. That's not it's to have sufficient empowerment to control bad situations without unduly punishing the reasonable situations, like the reasonable tethering as opposed to the dogs that are chained and left in the heat and the cold with no food, the abuse situations. And so I think that's what we're attempting, is to try to get wording and regulations that give us options and take other options as well. Even the people who were promoting the no tethering ordinance and offering services that would help people on whom it was a financial burden, or who needed some education on it. So there are always multiple ways to go at this. So can we move on to the rest of them? Yes, thank you, I'm sorry.
Just one.
Thank you.
On the dogs, the city, I don't know much about what the city does when they fine people. They do have fines, and but I believe that the county is not getting a share of the action, so to speak. And so our deputies are taking dogs to the shelter on $5.99, and they don't distinguish what kind of, if it's a country dog or a city dog. But mostly that problem is when they're unleashed with no tags and that sort of thing. So back to my common sense idea to engage the city to and figure out how we can recoup some of the problems in this area that we need a cut of for the cost of the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Manager Miller, I think there were several other miscellaneous updates.
One other,
One additional update?
yeah, equally controversial subject. Solid waste ordinance. So also I believe that several of you have received calls because our solid waste permits will expire will expire December 31st, and on January 1st, the fee for the permits will go up. This is another one of those ordinances that I think we visit like every 2 years and a year. Lately, it's been every year. So, if we go back to I wanna say it was 2013, we had a task force, a couple commissioners were involved in that task force. That task force made several recommendations relative to what we could do with our solid waste program to improve recycling, to set our fees in a way that would hopefully incentivize people to recycle more. And at the time, I think the goal was to get our permit fee structure such that it generated approximately 30% of our total cost of our program. I don't know that we've ever hit the 30%, but permit fees, what we would pay for, what customers would pay or residents would pay for their solid waste permits was targeted to go up year after year until we hit I think in the initial recommendation it was they would go up every year for 4 years until the 12 punch pass was $140, which was estimated at that time, this is several years ago, that based on the number of permits we would sell at that time, that we would generate enough revenue to be about 30% of our revenue, or that essentially the cost that people were paying was about 30% of our actual cost to provide solid waste services. We put that in place, we revisited that ordinance a few times. One time, we made the permits, they got up to $110. They never made it to the $140, they got to the $110, and then the ordinance was changed so that they never expired. That change, I think, happened in 2015. Then we did another change in 2018, October of 2018, and there might have been another one in the middle there, but in October of 2018, we changed the permit fees so that they, we did a moratorium. Previously, we did a moratorium, so there was another one in there. We did a moratorium on the permits getting up to, we did it so they didn't expire. Then, I think you were all here, except for Commissioner Garcia, we did a moratorium on the increase for a couple years. Then in 2018, that might have been in 2016 we did that. Then in 2017, we did a moratorium for 2 years. Then in 2018, we redid the fee structure. And what we said is, okay, the permits will still go up on January 1st, 2020, but no, actually 2021. So they don't go up this year. They don't go up till 2021. But what we did is we dropped the price for all the smaller punches.
So there wasn't a disincentive.
Correct, to buy less. So we got rid of this not expiring, so they now expire annually. So they expire annually, but you could buy less punches. And the average price per or the price per punch, whether you buy 3 punch, a 6 punch, or a 12 punch, it's $9.16 per trip. And only if you buy a 1 trip punch, that's $18. And that does go up on January 1st, 2021. All of them go up on January 1st, 2021. They don't go up this year, not 2020. So I think there might be a couple of things going on. I think some people think that the price is going up, but the price isn't going up. The punch price doesn't go up till January 1st, 2021. Secondly, we did make it so that regardless of how many punches you bought, it was the same price per trip, except for the 1 trip. But it's my understanding individuals are now concerned that their punch passes expire. They've been expiring since October of 2018, because the change in 2018 was dropping all the prices per permit or per trip, but that they would expire. Permits expire at the end of the calendar year in which they are issued, and permits must be obtained and purchased in advance of use at the convenience centers and are non-refundable. So that's what the ordinance currently says. And then we repealed and replaced the schedule of the waste permits to instead, because it used to be that the 12 punch was the cheapest per trip, but we made it so they're all the same.
But we made it so that they're all the same.
Except the 1 punch.
Except for the 1 punch, correct.
We made it so that it was all the same because otherwise there's a disincentive for buying fewer punches, and if they don't expire, it's fine. You can buy a 12 punch pass in November, you know, because it's not gonna expire on January 1st, and you can get that price break for having, you know, the economy of scale. So now if you wanna tell people, well, it's the end of the year, you can't, you know, buy fewer punches because they're gonna expire. The problem is when you get toward the end of the year and they're just selling 12 punch passes and not reminding people that they expire, and people get pissed off. So they should be able to know. It would probably be beneficial, and Gary's doing a lot to try to fix it with individuals who have that problem. Because for the most part, I think the people who are running the program are very aware and have been good about trying to educate people. But you basically probably need giant yellow signs with red letters that say, it's November, how often do you come to the dump? Consider only buying a 3 punch pass or something. To make that problem go away.
So my question is, if we don't want them, I have 1 meeting before the end of the year, because everybody's punch passes now expire on December 31st. I cannot, because the ordinance does not allow people to continue to use any punch passes that they currently have. If the board wants to do something different, I would need to bring a change to the ordinance on December 10th.
But we can't do that, it's an ordinance, right? You need public notice periods and all that stuff.
So I can't even do that, right? So the best I can do is bring publication of
Right.
title and general summary, but that's not gonna,
I mean,
what do we tell people to hang on to there's nothing, so what I had
You
mentioned
can- you
to
know, frankly,
Commissioner Roba, I didn't know if we could do something where people could come in and exchange if they had a receipt that they just bought it.
yeah,
And exchange it. But
I mean-
as it stands right now, I have no ability to exchange it or to extend it without an ordinance change.
well, you know, the issue in principle is less of a problem. People are the expiration is addressed by the fact that they can buy individual, smaller passes, smaller numbers of punches. But you do get some people who are just caught in the shift. They haven't had, they went in and bought it and they have a receipt having bought a 12 punch pass in November. Not to beat the system, just because they use 12 punch passes there, because they go every month and that's what's efficient. Passes aren't actually that easy to buy, there aren't that many places you can go buy them. You can't drive up to the disposal sites and buy a pass. You have to go to a senior center or something. And so,
Madam Chair?
I think that right now, we probably have only a few people that we have to deal with some sort of fix, saying, here's the way it's supposed to work, and from now on, you could have,
Which
like
I
12
understand, I just don't have any way to do it because the ordinance
Well,
doesn't
right.
allow me to do it.
Yeah, okay, Commissioner Henson.
So, is there some way that by
I know, I'll get you.
December 10, we could do a mini title and summary and add in say, we recognize that people have hardship and that they have, by past experience, they have continued to buy the 12-month pass because that's what they've always done, and can we issue them a pass for what is left on there
Let me
for
just
the
say,
next year?
you can't put 30 days between now and December 10th, no matter how you
No,
try
you
to
can't.
fix it. And
We could have a
for the
special
few people
meeting.
that have a real problem, there's nothing in the ordinance that says you can't refund them the money for a 12 punch pass, let them buy 3 punches or 1 punch till the end of the year, and then, fix it next year, and we can maybe change the ordinance and have, all the passes expire except the 12 punch, and that goes for 12 months from the date of purchase. Or put up, big giant yellow signs at every place that remind all the personnel to say when people are coming in October and they wanna buy or November and they wanna buy a 12-month pass, a 12 punch pass, somebody goes, do you come every week? Cause there aren't 12 months in the year left. So, the few instances I know, if you can't extend their passes, refund them the damn money and, for a smaller pass. And fix the ordinance next year. Commissioner Garcia.
So just really quick, so how come we can't do title and general summary in the December meeting and then the first meeting, the 14th or 10th of January, then pass ordinance?
Well, we
That-
can.
That only gives you 14 days from January 1st to.
Yep, well, because that's fine, that'll be fine for most people, but there'll be a few people whose passes then, will have 10 or 11 punches that expire on January 1st.
Commissioner Winkle's house for 14 days.
Amnesty.
Yeah, right, just tell them to ignore.
Madam Chair, I don't think that I can do something without an ordinance change. The permits say that there's no refund. They say when they expire. It's a slippery slope if I just all of a sudden say, well, because this person or that person. I don't think you want me doing that, because on this ordinance, no, I'm just saying, I don't feel comfortable because I don't know how I would do it. I think I have to have very specific
I knew they expired, I
rules.
didn't know they were non-refundable, I just figured there was a,
They've always been non-refundable.
Okay,
This has been,
that's great.
Madam Chair, this has just been one of our issues. Like I said, this is one of those things that creates a lot of frustration with the residents. So I would need to do some kind of ordinance change. We could have, I suppose, a special meeting to do it. I don't know if that's what the board wants to do, or if
How many other commissioners actually have, how many people do you think there are who've called in and said, I just bought a 12-month pass not knowing they expired, a 12 punch pass? How many?
I have a couple.
Okay, well, actually I have one, so there are 5, so.
no, I suppose you could tell them to hang on to them, and we could do something in January where they could get a credit towards the purchase of a new one.
That's fine.
That might be a.
That's just as good as any other solution. I was gonna say the commissioners can just buy 5 new passes for them January 1st and fix the short-term problem and then fix the long-term problem. So I love volunteering.
Let's move on.
I love
I'm
volunteering
sure
other
as soon
people's
as,
money.
as soon as the year, Madam Chair, as soon as the year goes by, those are gonna probably double or triple those phone calls. I'm sure even maybe more. So I think that this solution that Manager Miller's come up with, because then we can maybe have a sign at the substation or even at the transfer station saying that we're gonna give credit for this year and then be aware that next year. But I still wanna bring up the point that I think we need to figure out a way of charging a little bit differently. I know that I talked to Manager Miller about the scale, because we had mentioned that at one point, because there are a lot of smaller contractors that do a remodel and they tear out sheetrock and different things, they take it to our transfer station, and that's a lot of weight. We get charged by the weight, right, when we're taking our trash,
When we
right?
take it to the landfill.
So that's how we establish what the cost of the permits are, is the total cost is going by weight. So you have somebody that has typical, household trash, it's gonna weigh a lot less than sheetrock and those materials. So I know we can't probably, because then it would change our whole charging system for us to charge for the passes, so it would be a very difficult feat for us to move forward with. But if there's some other way that we could figure out a way to charge differently for household trash versus commercial type construction trash, it would be, I think, beneficial to our constituents. And I think that contractors should pay probably more to throw the trash that they're putting in our transfer station, rather than.
I thought commercial did.
I don't believe at our transfer station in Palakia, basically, because I've taken trash myself and I would have gladly paid, because I threw toilets and sheetrock, because I was helping my daughter with the remodel, and so we tore out all kinds of lumber and everything, and it was a huge trailer full, and I got my card punched once, and I think that in those situations there should be, it should be thought of a little bit differently.
That's not a bad
And
point.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Roybal, we have had discussions about going to different ways. I think, part of it has been because we have these other transfer stations that we lease, very small ones. There was no way to do scales at those. I think if we go back to the recommendations of the task force as well, was to get down to having just a couple of major transfer stations. And if we did that and we closed because there's 2 ways to recover our costs. Lower our costs or raise our fees. So so that philosophy of going by tonnage was one that, well, yes, if we went to having less transfer stations, if we went to having 3 kind of major transfer stations, one in Pacona that we owned versus a lease, one in San Marcos and one in Stanley, and then used if there was a way to use the Bert or the dump for Tesuque and La Cienega. We can go back and kind of reconstitute a task force again. It's just really difficult, and I don't know, cause we can't have, and part of it's technology issue, we can't have, and maybe there's good enough coverage now, maybe there's better cell coverage, and maybe you could use like a debit card instead of a punch pass.
Right.
But in the past, we have not been able, we can't accept cash at the transfer stations because it's a danger for the
Sure,
staff
oh,
there.
no, that I agree with.
And it's a fraud issue, embezzlement. We used to accept cash at the transfer stations and we had an employee that embezzle. We didn't have electricity and we didn't have internet, so that was why we couldn't use scales at some of them because we didn't have any electronics. So, it might be, times may have changed where we actually have something where we can use solar or something, but it's definitely a challenge where we're limited by cell coverage, electricity, things like that at the rural ones. And and our big complaint when we talked about closing the smaller ones, we had a lot of people say, oh, that'll just encourage people to dump in, you made it less convenient. They're not convenient centers, we have to drive too far. Oh, I forgot El Dorado. So El Dorado, San Marcos, Stanley, Pewaukee Valley, and then close the smaller one.
But, those are good points, and Gary had brought up though that, the county is moving toward the electronic ability to do more electronic payments. Might be another 10 months or so, or a year before it's really up and running, but that would open up other possibilities, and frankly, you've mentioned a few other things, with respect to cell coverage and internet access and other options, satellite options, solar options and stuff, so maybe if we could look into that, we could get a better solution, but frankly, I just want to put on the table your solution for something we can do for the individuals, for the immediate problem, did sound good. Commissioner Wetzel.
Just real quick, I just wanted to add to that thought as far as, one of the reasons why we made the permits, a 3-punch permit versus a 12-punch permit, the same price is one of my points that I brought up is that I felt like people that couldn't afford a 12-punch permit were being penalized, because they could only afford to buy a 3-punch permit. They're sort of being penalized because they don't have as much money as other people.
That's the point I was trying to make, I agree, and I thought we fixed that, but
part
of the fix only works if they understand the dynamics of how to plan for when to retire.
And then going back to possibly only having a couple of transfer stations, I think that if we offered a transfer station that had a scale and people started hearing, well, it's a lot cheaper to go to Pewaukee if you just have household trash, because it's gonna cost you less in the long run to use that station versus going all the way, or versus going to where you're still using the punch pass, and maybe that would actually get people to turn to going to these other ones, even if it's a little bit further of a drive,
Interesting.
That could change, people's mindsets, but it might take a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, when it's only 20 or 30 customers that are going to one of the transfer stations, maybe at that point we make the change. But I don't know, just food for thought. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, that was excellent.
So Madam Chair, we'll bring requested published title and general summary on December 10th with the ordinance for the beginning of January with some way to refund but credit to the purchase of the next year for this year. And if anybody does call you and they're in that situation, make sure they save their receipt so that we can identify when they purchased it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you for thinking about this.
Thank you.
So that,
Can we go to B on the next one? Cause I have people waiting.
we're right there, so this is fine. We always do the resolutions before we do general comments. So are you finished with this? I think that's everything.
That was everything under my.
Thank you. So that takes us from matters from the county commissioner. The first resolution, which is under item B, is a resolution in support of the appropriation of funds by the New Mexico legislature for Grum fresh fruits, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay,
Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, welcome, Patricia and Pam, Roy, nice to see you both. This is a resolution I've brought up in the last 3 years, and I think that it's incredibly important to provide fresh food to our youngest and our oldest populations. And if you read the resolution, you can see that it's really important to provide this kind of service throughout the county. We have a lot of people who face food insecurity. It goes along with our dedication to the Food Depot and raising food, raising money to feed people with food insecurity. So I respectfully request that the county commission pass this resolution, and I'm making a motion in support of the appropriation of funds to the New Mexico legislature for New Mexico grown fresh fruits and vegetables for school and senior meal program and related education programs for school and farmers.
Okay, well, that's, okay, I assume everybody read it, but actually, before I have further discussion, then,
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
that was actually what I was getting to, but frankly, I think it was rude to make the motion before we actually heard the
I'm sorry.
presentation. But we now have a motion and a second, if you'd like to do the presentation, really appreciate it.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. The presentation is really very short. As Commissioner Hanson said, this is similar to resolutions that the BCC has passed in the past several years. It's consistent with the County Health Action Plan, with the priority for increasing consumption of healthy food and the specific indicator of people, increasing the percentage of people consuming 5 or more fresh fruits and vegetables a day. And the only difference between this one, or the primary difference between this resolution and the ones that have been passed in past years, is that it also specifically refers to fresh produce for seniors, and the legislature has there's been legislative support for that in the 2019 legislative session, so we thought that this resolution should include appropriations for New Mexico grown fresh fruits and vegetables for senior meals. So it's consistent with everything that we are doing as a county and our Santa Fe County Connect project, which is connecting people with the resources they need, including food.
And so what is the approach, what is it going to help support specifically? The appropriation that
It's going to help support New Mexico grown fresh fruits and vegetables for school meals, so for school districts.
The existing program is what I was gonna expand it, that's what
It's
I'm
going
asking.
to additional appropriation for that, and then also there's an existing it's more of a pilot program for senior, for meals in senior centers, and the hope is that that could be expanded, because that's not affecting Santa Fe County in specific this year. And I will let Pam has been more involved with speaking to the legislators, so if there are additional questions about exactly what's going on in the legislature, she could speak to that.
37 seconds on
Right, Madam Chair and committee members or commissioners, and I'm just gonna share these are examples, so I won't go through them in detail. But just to share, just to share it really quickly, there are various priorities, and the reason why the words education are in there and other support programs in that resolution.
Yeah, we need a couple more.
Oh, there.
Oh, here they are.
One more, sorry about that.
We got it.
Thank you.
And I won't go into this in detail, this is just for you to have beyond the moment, so that we also potentially would have the opportunity to work with your lobbyists during the legislative session if these are priorities on your docket. So to add to what Ms. Boyce shared, a couple things that you do know because of the work that you all have done and this work statewide and to your request is, for instance, in the schools, year before last, the state legislature appropriated $425,000 for schools to purchase local produce. The consequence of that was schools purchased almost $1.2 million in New Mexico grown fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's an incentive for schools to learn how to change their way of budgeting to buy local, so that they're not buying quite as much outside of New Mexico and they're buying more inside New Mexico. So to Ms. Boyce's point, we really want to see that program happen in the senior centers. and potentially in childhood, early childhood care beyond that. But there's also support programs. In this last legislative session, there was a package of programs that we really advocated for that include agricultural workforce development initiative. So it's a program that farmers and ranchers can apply for, and it really gets young adults or adults who want to learn how to farm and become farmers and ranchers into a viable program. This year we really want to push for a K through 12 New Mexico Food and Agricultural Experiential Learning Grant Program, which means schools could apply for a grant or grants for experiential learning programs. It could be anything from FFA to 4-H to ag in the classroom, cooking with kids, to pair up with those fresh fruits and vegetables that are served in the cafeteria. Soil Health Act was passed, and now an appropriation there, a program for farmers and ranchers to apply to. And the ones that Ms. Boyce brought up, which is to expand programs for seniors, really focusing on New Mexico grown in varying ways, like the expansion of the Farmers Market Nutrition Program and this whole pilot. So those are a few programs that we're really focused on, and we're working in cooperation and partnership with the New Mexico Food and Agriculture Policy Council. That's the sheet you have here. These particular initiatives have been submitted to the Legislative Finance Committee and the Governor's Office as well, and we've been working very closely with all of them. With that,
So are there other questions, people?
Just really quick, Madam Chair, first of all, thank you, Pam Roy, for what you do at the state legislature for the last 5-7 years. I actually have seen you do what you're doing. And in order to get an appropriation of $425,000 continuously for programs, I think that's great. And I see the work that you do over there. You know, dealing with the school board, school districts, I actually see the importance of how it works and what it needs to happen, why it needs to happen. One of the things that's interesting that people may not know is Representative Candace Ezell actually brought up, why can't we buy beef? Local beef. And so you're going down that road with her, and just great job that you do. And so instead of buying fresh fruit, we're actually going to buy local beef, right? And everything else so we can feed our students. So one of the questions I have is the $425,000. So by this senior program, will it affect that funding? Or just hold new funding for seniors?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, couple things. So this year, for the senior program, this brand new senior program is a pilot program of $50,000. And it now is being housed in aging and long-term services. It's had a bit of a late start. It's going to be a program that starts in the winter. So we'll start next week. But the good news is we still have farmers. We have farmers who have product that's just come out of the ground, that's in storage, apples, potatoes, winter squashes, carrots, onions, pinto beans, and we have greenhouses that, and Santa Fe Community College is a good example actually. They're interested in moving into that marketplace with their new program as long as they don't preempt any other farm in New Mexico from those original sales. So, so that $50,000, the request this year, moving into the 2020 session for the senior program, will be $100,000. The bill was already drafted and endorsed by the Health and Human Services Interim Committee 2 weeks ago. And Senator Stefanix is the sponsor, along with Representative Gail Armstrong, of both of the two senior bills on this sheet. So it's probably more than you needed.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, and to that $425,000 with the schools, that was the legislature appropriated $450,000 this year. The Public Education Department, now that this is a permanent program with staff in the Department of Education across the street, they are looking for $500,000 recurring. Right now, only $200,000 is recurring, but they're hoping for it, and they put that in their budget request to the Legislative Finance Committee. And this whole piece from the Department of Ag, this is their request to LFC. So our goal is to see these things as a whole collective, and this is years in coming, and that all these departments are beginning to really focus on working together across sectors. And I think, one, this is happening now, and we've been working with these departments. So we're seeing not program by program, appropriation by appropriation, but putting them as a whole and working all year round to hopefully see permanent programs with these.
Madam Chair, just really quick on that note, there's a lot of stuff that are happening that how we all need to communicate, schools, state, county, city, because, you know, you said, and you're doing it as into, anywhere from the Yasi Martinez lawsuit, that the schools actually just participated in one for the, against the state of Mexico. How do we pre-K, how are we gonna do this? It's almost gonna be like almost a $900 million rollout. How do we do it? But there's a lot of stuff that are happening out there that, but thank you for what you do, and thank you for what you're doing for getting our local industry farmers involved, right? But thank you.
So being a localist and one of my longtime dedication to localism, this I feel like is such an important part of that initiative to make sure that our children understand that local food is grown right here in their own backyard, and that seniors have access to local food, that, you know, not everything has to come off a shelf and has to be trucked into the state, and that New Mexico can actually produce food that, you know, it really satisfies our children and our seniors. So I'm really grateful that you have added seniors into this program. It makes me really happy.
And not to mention that local food is a much more secure. I think globally, act locally has security issues as well as sustainability issues. It's a very excellent idea, and it's very good to see things starting to come together more, because this does have, you know, lots nowadays it's chic to think about co-benefits. So you have a direct benefit to the kids and the seniors because of the importance of fresh food, and it's the benefit on the other side to the local economy and to grow our agro industry and whatever. So I know how much effort it takes on your part. That's quite amazing. So are there additional questions? If
Just
not,
make sure to actually help out the green tractor farm in Los Angeles. Just kidding, as well as Commissioner Hentz's community farm there, and all the rest of them.
We all have community farms.
that's right, and we should have more of them.
Right.
So if there isn't any further discussion, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and for doing this work.
Well, happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you're all eating well.
Yeah, well, that's.
Madam Chair.
Yes, I was ready. I'm sorry, I thought I said yes, but
Oh,
we're
I'm
still
sorry,
talking.
well, she was.
No, yeah, of course.
You just passed resolution number 2019-143.
One four three, did you say?
Yes, 143.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So that moves us to C. I'm sorry? Oh, that moves us to 8C, resolution supporting protection of wildlife corridors. Commissioner Hanson.
So I don't have anybody to present here, but this is something that I have brought up before. Last year, we supported the Wildlife Corridor Act in the legislature, and this is a Wildlife Corridor Act in the Congress, and it was introduced by Senator Tom Udall to establish a national wildlife corridor to provide for protection and restoration of certain native fish, wildlife, and plant species. Further, the purpose of the Wildlife Corridor Conservation Act of 2019 are: 1, support a diverse array of native species, including species protected under federal, state, and tribal law that have experienced or may experience habitat loss, degeneration, fragmentation, or obstruction to connectivity, to provide long-term habitat connectivity for native species migration, dispersal, adaptation to climate and other environmental changes and genetic exchange, to help restore wildlife movement that has been disrupted by habitat loss, degradation, fragmentation, and obstruction, to facilitate coordination, landscape, and seascape scale connectivity planning and management across jurisdictions, and to support state, tribal, local, voluntary, private landowners, and federal agency decision makers in planning and developing of national wildlife corridors. The reason I brought this forward now is because it is in the Congress, and I wanted to be able to send this to Senator Udall so that he would know that the Board of County Commissioners supported this initiative. It's incredibly important to protect our wildlife that does not have a voice, and we are their voice. And so I am bringing this forward, and I hope that you will support this. Can I make a motion?
Yes, you can. We don't
And
have
I
a
would like to
presentation.
make a motion to support a resolution supporting the protection of wildlife corridors in the upper Rio Grande Basin, urging the U.S. Congress to adopt the Wildlife Corridors Conservation Act of 2019 and expressing support for Santa Fe National Forest to adapt and establish the Calle del Rio Wildlife and Cultural Interpretive Management Area.
So I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Excellent. So is there discussion or questions on this?
Just real quick, Madam Chair, in regards to the wildlife corridor, I think this is a great idea, and I would hope that it would actually be throughout Santa Fe County or throughout the state of New Mexico, because actually the other day I was driving down I-40 and we have these wildlife corridors down in I-40 that I never realized that the Highway Department or the federal government actually has installed where the wildlife
Bypasses?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I'm interested in is this is happening all over Colorado, is regarding, can we put like a camera there to see how many wildlife, dogs, deer, elk are actually going through there? Just data is what I'm interested in, because that'd be interesting to see
I
whether they're working or not.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think there, I would make the projection to say that they're working, but data is always good. You know, I mean, we all want data because that supports our belief system. So this was a resolution that was specific, and last year, before you were on the commission, Commissioner Garcia, I brought a resolution forward about supporting wildlife corridors throughout the state. And that also, I believe, passed the legislature. So this was just another step in that process.
Thank you.
Okay.
Further discussion? This is a very worthwhile thing to pursue, very good to have brought both of these resolutions. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Excellent, thank you so much. So that takes us back to 8A. Are there any general matters from any commissioners? Commissioner Hanson.
So I just wanted to share with the commission that I did attend the Santa Fe Water Sustainability issue on December 14th about the pipeline, and it was interesting to see
Which pipeline?
the pipeline to take wastewater from the Paseo del Rio, is that what they're calling it now? Paseo del Rio wastewater plant on the Santa Fe River back to the Rio Grande to get the Buckman return credit. It was very interesting to see this presentation. One thing I would like to report is that there was a tremendous amount of consultants there. There must have been hired at least 8 to 10 consultants for 2 nighs to push this idea about the return flow credit. And you know, both Commissioner Garcia and myself, the wastewater plant is in my district, the pipeline would be going through my district, and Commissioner Garcia has constituents downstream that are extremely concerned about the loss of water in their district. And so, and also there was members from the Cochiti Pueblo there who were also very concerned about this. So it was a really good presentation, and I'm glad that I went, and I think that we should have a seat at the table at Santa Fe County. and have a discussion about this with the city, cause we are part of the Buckman direct diversion, and we have this is return flow credits to the Buckman direct diversion. So I'm just sharing that piece of information with you.
Manager Miller?
Madam Chair, the city has come and met with us and talked to us. Initially, we were part of that feasibility study, but we were asked if we wanted to be a part of that based upon the thought that we would have wastewater that we could take from the quill plant to be either, you know, put back upstream, back into the river, or treated. But at the time that study was done, which was, a feasibility study was done several years ago, and the water out of our quill plant is not of quality that any of those options would be feasible. Now, just to say we are, though, improving that, and we do have a contract out right now for design build to redo the quill plant, and hopefully we would have a different quality of water coming out of our treatment plant to have options of things that we could do with that. As far as customers that we have that and our wastewater is sent to the city's treatment plant, we do not receive any credit for that. If we were a part of the reuse line to the river, we could benefit based upon our San Juan Chama water rights or some return flow credits of our San Juan Chama water rights.
So it was a number of years ago, I think in 2015, it was called the Corello study that was done. But anyhow, I just wanted to share that information, and thank you, Manager Miller, for that update. I appreciate that. The other interesting community or event I went to was P&M held a technical meeting on community solar, and it was clearly just a technical meeting and not to discuss policy, and policy was kind of discouraged in all ways, but it was an overview of what they're capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing. And one of the most interesting things about the meeting was the fact that that they don't know the real-time data, and electricity is produced at the moment it's used, and they don't have the ability to calculate how much electricity is used at a month's time. Their meters are not smart. That was their reasoning for this.
For what? Reason
For
having community or not doing?
having community solar.
Well, that's
And
hard
so
to solve.
it was a little disappointing.
Well, I'm not sure it's technically accurate either.
Well, the guy was their technical expert, so to speak. But I just wanted to share that information because I think that it requires more discussion and more ability, because I think community solar is incredibly important for the state, and we need to find a way to do this. So, I mean, those are really my only two updates. I am on the Northern Rio Grande Heritage Executive Board, and we are in the middle of a search for an executive director. So if anyone is interested, they could go to the Northern Rio Grande Heritage Area website and apply.
Thank you. Commissioner Raymond, do you have anything? Nope. Commissioner Roybal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanna see if we can get information presented to us relative to what it takes for a Santa Fe County resident to actually apply to get a permit to put solar. I think that there's a lot of requirements necessary to get a permit to put solar on your house that aren't really necessary. I think there's other states that you can apply online and get your permit to put solar in the same day. And I think at Santa Fe County, I could be wrong, but I'd like to get that information,
That would
if
be
we
a
could
good
have it
thing.
presented, because I think that we require for residents to show where their well is, where their septic tank is, warranty deeds, things of that nature that I think just makes it to where some of the residents may change their mind about doing it because it's so much paperwork to fill out. So I think for us to promote the solar power, we need to make the permit as easy as possible. I think that there's a lot of things that I mean, it doesn't, whether or not where you're gonna put your solar panel doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where your septic tank is unless you're gonna mount it on the ground and you wanna make sure you don't hit it. The other thing is, I think it's more of a permit like a carport. Basically, they wanna make sure it's structurally sound when they put it on your roof. And so I
It should
could
be
see,
easy to do that.
CID should be involved to make sure that it is installed correctly, but I really think that the permit process should be simplified at the county, so I'd like that to be something we look at.
Excellent, thank you.
I
Can
wholeheartedly support that.
Yeah. Commissioner Garcia, did you?
So just really quick, just like to wish everybody out there in the community, especially the individuals that actually need some help, happy Thanksgiving. Also in regards to the P&M issue, that's kind of find that hard to swallow because they send me a bill every month and that thing's detailed. So that's it. And another way, in regards to the water line that's actually proposed by the city of Santa Fe, I'll listen to my comments to what were in the paper the other day, Sunday, and I'll leave it at that. Also, just like to
What were they?
just in regards, I have a lot of concerns as into what the city wants to do for the people in La Majada area, and some people live in the La Cienega area that actually utilize that water for irrigation. And also, just we don't do this very often, but I'd actually like to thank Ambra, my staff, who actually has really been helping out and dealing with some situations in the past month or 2 months that I've dealt with, and so thank you, Ambra. And I think that's it. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody here at the table. County Manager Miller, thank you for what you do. I know. Long
It is
weekend, but
Thanksgiving after all.
thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I wanna echo, Commissioner Garcia's wish for everybody in Santa Fe County to have a blessed Thanksgiving and be safe. Make sure that, we take care of one another and use Lyft or whichever ride service that you need to make sure we keep our roads safe. We do have a lot of people during this time of the year that like to celebrate with their families and friends. Just make sure we're safe and look out for one another. So I just wanna make sure everybody has a blessed holiday season. Thank you.
That's great. God, I have a few things. I only had one or two, but really, there are a couple of issues. I mean, the county ought to be engaged with the city on the city water line. And as Manager Miller said, I certainly have been, and the county has been fairly engaged. We have, water issues go across jurisdictional lines, so the way we plan, and given that the county is trying to plan conservation, we've been trying to do that. That's in conjunction with the city. That's part of the reasons we have a water policy advisory committee. The city has a conservation committee, and frankly, they have been working together and talking about this. And as part of having a seat at that table and talking over the last 3 years that we've been seated here with the city about this project, we have talked to them about some of the things that are important to the county, including being able to plan into the future more than just strict the existing framework within which water is managed in the West, which forces consideration of getting return flow credits to be able to manage water and have water supplies, domestic water supplies planned into the future. And that has centered around using that pipeline for other things. That pipeline, whatever the actual percentage of it is, can potentially get water that, which in the 20 years ago, return flow credits were the way Western water use, managed water, you put it back and you could take it out later. You diverted water, you put what you need back and you've got to take it again later. But that pipeline brings water 90% of the way up from the treatment plant to where you could return it to the river. You could divert it directly to BDD for direct reuse. You could take it up into the Santa Fe River for passive aquifer recharge. You could consider diverting it to where the Buckman wells are to enhance their recharge. The truth is, the city is now talking about those options, so they have come around and expanded their planning on that, and I think that's part of what the county ought to continue to work with the city on, to be able to use that to its best, to the best advantages. And the other thing that actually Manager Miller mentioned had to do with other options, looking at the bigger picture. He said it is true and it's understandable that people have gotten used to using water that has been available, even though that's water that's, like, weirdly, we think about water ownership, right? And you know, there you have water that hasn't been used, but the city had the municipality has a right to use, kind of like having a viewscape across somebody else's private land that you now may not be able to have because they want to build their house there. And you object because it's like, well, I've always had that viewscape, I have a right to have that. Well, no, somebody else owns the land. So the county does have options that we can look at in terms of other water to replace some of that use. So I think we need to continue working with the city and to look at it in the bigger picture. I do want to join everybody else in wishing an incredibly happy Thanksgiving. And I had a really horrifying experience this morning. I spent my entire morning out on a horrible head-on collision on Route 50 on the road into Pecos, and you know, thank goodness nobody died. But it was a horrific, and alcohol was involved that early in the morning. Really ruined the lives of a family of 7 that all got transported to various local area hospitals. And so what I really want to make a pitch for is for everybody to have as blessed a holiday. Have all the fun you want, but please, 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 if you have lots of fun and you drink, please don't drive. Community solar, I can't help but feel a little snarky. I agree with you completely. Community solar is hugely important. But the technical experts for the tobacco industry argued against the science of you know, cancer-related deaths. And I just find it difficult to just accept because they say, you know, I'm the expert here from out of town to tell you what's possible, that it's not technically feasible for them to track use, and yet that's the exact kind of information they base their economic, you know, their fiscal planning on. So, you know, I kind of had to chime in on that, and I think you would kind of imply the same thing, and we really need to push community solar. And on a small local note, the first Saturday of December, December 7th, another coffee with the commish. Well, this time it's gonna go from 9 to noon. People should come from District 4 or frankly, any place you wanna come from, because we do have donuts and coffee, to talk about anything that's on your mind. And people in District 4 know that there's a big water project, the line that's going to El Dorado and then to Canyoncito. And Public Works will be there to talk about that project because that project has advanced to the point of, like, I think 90% design, and they're moving ahead with you know, the next steps in terms of getting right of ways straightened out and giving information to the public about it. So they will be there also to talk about that project. So anybody interested in that should come and learn something. Commissioner Hanson.
So thank you very much for your support on those issues, I appreciate that. Since Daniel has come into the room, I wanted to mention that I did send out, with Ambra's help, which I'm grateful for, a Thanksgiving message to all of the Santa Fe County staff to have a wonderful Thanksgiving, but I can no longer send it out from my computer to all of the staff. And so I would like to be able to continue to do that, but I was grateful to Ambra for having access to all of the county to send out my greeting. So I hope that we can resolve that and get it fixed like we had it before. I know with the move, there's been many changes, so thank you, Daniel, for everything.
We'll get to it.
Commissioner Roybal, you had some.
I actually just had one more announcement that I wanted to wish Commissioner Garcia a happy birthday, which will be coming on Friday. So
Happy birthday.
You're just 78 now or something?
Yeah.
Are you 28 this year?
61.
Happy
Eligible
birthday.
for benefits.
And also just a happy birthday to my daughter Amber. She'll be turning 25 on Saturday. So.
Oh, happy
Which
birthday.
is really amazing because you're only 28 too, right?
Yeah.
Happy
Started
birthday
early.
to everybody. Anything else? Yes.
I just wanted for the record to give you the last resolution.
Oh my God.
Because that went by. 2019-144.
Thank you. I'm sorry I forgot about that.
That's all
I
right.
appreciate it. So that goes to matters from other elected officials. But seeing no other elected officials, I think I'll close that matter and move on to matters from the county attorney. Rachel.
Madam Chair, did you want to address the report so that we close after?
I'm
matters from
sorry,
county
the
attorney?
reports from the departments.
Just-
Thank you for the reminder. We usually do that. First of all, thanks to all the department heads for those reports. Does anybody have any questions on them? So
No,
they
but
are
I
free to go.
appreciated all the reports and I like seeing the numbers of how many houses were built and.
Excellent, no, that's very true, they're very informative and helpful. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for that, because we don't want them to have to hang around, really appreciate your being here and available.
And I thank you for all the reports, because it's very rewarding to be able to read them and see all the great things that Santa Fe County is doing.
So, Madam Attorney.
Madam Chair, if we could go into executive session pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1H7, to discuss pending or threatened litigation and specifically potential claims arising from the adult detention facility.
I would entertain a motion in that
I
regard.
move to go into executive session to discuss the issues that the county attorney brought forward.
Thank you, I have a motion and a second, could I have a roll call?
Madam Chair Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Roybal,
Yes.
Commissioner Moreno,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
He just stepped down. Oh, there he is, Commissioner
Yes.
Garcia, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hanson.
Yes.
So we are now in executive session, we won't have any business following that, so thank you everybody who's been listening in.